Once you hear this, your perception of power will never be the same. Have you ever noticed how the quietest person in the room can hold more power than the loudest? How a pause, a gaze, or a moment of absence can twist minds and ignite obsession. Silence is never empty. It is a vault of fear, a mirror of desire, a trap for the unguarded mind. It whispers secrets that words cannot contain, and it exposes what people fight so hard to hide. When the mind is starved of information, panic rises, curiosity claws at reason, desire emerges from uncertainty. Every unanswered question, every withheld word, every invisible gesture pulls others closer, compelled not by charm, but by the raw gravity of the unknown. This is the first illusion of power, the lie that power must be loud, brash, and undeniable. Real influence thrives in shadows, in the spaces between breaths and the pauses between sentences. Quiet becomes a presence, a force that cannot be touched, only felt. In the world of darkness, to speak is to lose. To remain still is to dominate. To be silent is to hold the mind of another in the palm of your hand. Prepare yourself. Once you step into the psychology of darkness, nothing will ever feel safe, predictable, or comfortable again. The power of silence is waiting, and it does not forgive the unprepared. Before we begin, subscribe, like, and share, and step carefully into what comes next. Chapter 1. Power that never explains itself. Understanding this may make everyone around you feel exposed, vulnerable, and strangely compelled to obey. Power that explains itself is already dying. Every word spent on justification, every story told to clarify intention, is a surrender of authority. The moment you speak to defend, to illuminate, or to rationalize, you have revealed a weakness others are waiting to exploit. The truly dangerous, the truly magnetic, the figures who leave rooms bending in their invisible orbit, none of them owe an explanation. They move, and the world moves with them. They act, and others react. Their silence, their omission, their refusal to account for every step becomes a psychological weapon sharper than any sword. Why? Because humans are born to interpret, to guess, to fill in blanks. A mind that is denied clarity does not retreat. It obsesses. It projects fantasies, fears, and desires into the gaps you leave. If you explain, you give them the map. If you withhold, you give them the labyrinth. The labyrinth is infinitely more powerful. One who never justifies never loses. One who never answers controls the story, the perception, the narrative itself. Explanation is the language of weakness. To justify is to admit that someone might question your right to act, your authority to exist, your intelligence to decide. Justification assumes the existence of doubters and begs their permission. Authority that begs is authority that can be taken away. Real power, the kind that lingers long after a person leaves a room, does not beg. It does not demand attention. It does not justify itself. It is, and that is enough. Consider the people around you. Who commands attention without asking for it? Who makes others lean forward with curiosity simply by not speaking, by allowing a pause to stretch uncomfortably in the room? That is the person who understands what most never will. Explanations are invitations to challenge. Each word in defense is a fault in the armor. Every justification is a crack through which others will insert their own desires, doubts, and manipulations. Silence, carefully wielded, preserves integrity. It preserves power, and yet the world insists upon noise. It demands justification. It clings to clarity. The world is terrified of ambiguity because ambiguity reminds it of its own incompleteness. People panic when they do not understand motive. They fear what they cannot predict. They seek to fill the empty spaces, to name the unspoken, to contain the untouchable. And in that panic, you find leverage. In that hunger, you find dominance. Those who owe no answers wield authority like a shadow. They move in quiet corridors of influence, unseen but profoundly felt. They never explain why a decision was made. They simply make it. They never apologize for their presence. They simply occupy it. And because the world insists on understanding, you do not need to justify. The hunger for comprehension will justify you. Observe those who fail. They are loud. They justify. They explain, rationalize, and apologize. They speak in parentheses, in hedges and clarifications that eat away at the power they believe they hold. The more they explain, the weaker they become. People begin to doubt, to question, to resist. The very act of clarification is a whisper to the world that you are unsure, that your presence is negotiable. Every word is a step backward. Every apology is a surrender. You cannot reclaim power once it has been diluted by overexposure. Psychology is at play here in its cruelest, most beautiful form. The human mind interprets silence as a challenge, absence as authority, ambiguity as superiority. When someone refuses to explain, they are not arrogant. They are strategic. They understand the delicate dance between curiosity and obsession, between desire and frustration, between power and submission. To answer too quickly is to give away the prize before it is even won. To explain is to replace awe with understanding, magnetism with comprehension, dominance with equality. The truly powerful manipulate perception by withholding, by carefully curating the information they share, by allowing shadows to move across the minds of others. They speak selectively, act deliberately, and allow gaps to widen into chasms of intrigue. In those chasms, desire and fear coexist, and those who enter cannot escape without being changed. People are drawn to that which they cannot fully grasp, enslaved by the unknown, addicted to the unanswered. And in this silent influence, the operator of the void reigns supreme. History is littered with figures who understood this instinctively. The ruler who spoke little but whose presence was law. The strategist who acted unseen but whose decisions shaped nations. The artist whose absence from society only intensified their legend. All of them knew. Explanation is a leash you place on yourself, and the world will tug relentlessly. The quiet, the unseen, the unanswerable, these are the true masters. They own nothing and are owed nothing, yet everything bends around their gravity. Even in intimate relationships, this principle holds. One who constantly explains erodes mystery. One who justifies erodes attraction. One who seeks validation erodes power. Desire thrives in uncertainty. Respect grows from observation. Control emerges from restraint. Those who learn this quickly wield influence in ways others will never even recognize. Those who do not remain entrapped in the tyranny of needing to be understood, heard, or approved. There is an art to never explaining, a subtlety in refusing to clarify. It is not cruelty, it is mastery, it is not detachment, it is precision. The mind that is silent, the presence that does not justify, the figure who owes no answers. They are terrifying because they are untouchable. They operate in a realm where emotion, ego, and expectation cannot reach them. And it is here, in this quiet dominion, that true power is forged. Power that never explains itself is quiet, deliberate, and eternal. It does not seek admiration. It does not crave validation. It does not ask for permission. It exists outside negotiation, untouched by criticism, invulnerable to doubt. And in a world desperate to understand, to question, to define, it is the silence that speaks the loudest. If you wish to walk in the realm of true influence, learn to wield this silence. Observe without interference. Act without explanation. Let absence become your ally, and withholding your weapon. Those who cannot understand will attempt to control. Those who try to control will be drawn to you, powerless to resist. And as the mind searches for meaning in your quiet, as curiosity grows into obsession, you will realize the terrifying truth. The less you explain, the more they believe you are everything. Power is not in what you say. Power is in what you leave unsaid. And in that space, silence becomes a kingdom. Chapter 2. The Terror of the Unreadable. This chapter will make your presence a psychological maze others cannot escape. Humans are terrified of what they cannot decipher. Every mind hungers for patterns, for signals, for predictability. When faced with ambiguity, the brain panics, fires neurons in frantic bursts, and begins to fabricate meaning where none exists. The unreadable is not neutral, it is threatening. It triggers the most primitive parts of the human psyche, the parts that crave control, certainty, and understanding. And in that terror, power is born. Imagine standing in a room with someone whose intentions cannot be traced. Their expression is steady, their words few, their movements deliberate yet impossible to anticipate. You watch them trying to read, to predict, to comprehend. And the more you try, the less you succeed. The brain refuses to accept the void. It begins to populate the emptiness with projections, fantasies, fears. Every pause becomes a confession. Every silence, a hidden threat. Every smile, a riddle. The unreadable is a psychological weapon, sharper than the sharpest blade. capable of ensnaring the minds of all who dare approach. Ambiguity is not merely an absence of information. It is a neurological threat. The brain craves closure. It refuses to let a puzzle remain unsolved. When it encounters a human it cannot read, it overcompensates, inventing narratives, assigning motives, and spiraling into obsession. This is the quiet terror of the unreadable. You do not act overtly, you do not clarify, yet the minds around you become prisoners of your mere existence. You become their fixation, their unanswered question, the source of sleepless nights and whispered speculation. Think of those who try to unravel you. Every attempt strengthens your position. Every guess they make about you reveals their own psychology more than yours. Their projection becomes your cloak, their obsession your armor. People fear what they cannot categorize. They hate the unpredictable. They distrust the ambiguous. And by existing as an enigma, you force them into a state of heightened attention, constant vigilance, and relentless curiosity. You are a riddle wrapped in shadows, and in the terror of trying to solve you, others surrender power without knowing it. Humans also fear emotional unreadability. A smile that does not reveal intent, a gaze that does not confess thought, a demeanor that does not betray desire. These are subtle acts of dominance. When someone cannot determine whether they are loved, rejected, respected, or dismissed, their mind is thrown into turmoil. They compensate by overanalyzing every gesture, every syllable, every pause. They build elaborate scenarios in their heads, projecting their deepest hopes and darkest fears onto you. The unreadable is an invitation to obsession. This terror is primal. It predates civilization, predates language, predates law. Our ancestors needed to know whether the predator stalking them would kill or ignore, attack or flee. A signal they could not interpret was a danger to survival. That instinct survives in the modern mind. And in every social interaction, the unreadable triggers the same neurological panic. The mind cannot rest until the ambiguity is resolved. Until it fills in the blanks, it will remain in a state of heightened alert, vibrating between desire and dread. And this is where power lies, where fear and fascination intersect. The unreadable also weaponizes attention. People cannot help but notice what they cannot understand. Your movements, even your silence, dominate the mental landscape of others. Every gesture is scrutinized, every absence felt, every word amplified. They become alert to your presence in ways they are not to the ordinary, to the predictable. By refusing to reveal everything, by keeping a part of yourself hidden, you harness the natural human compulsion to seek meaning. They chase you not because they wish to control you, but because their own minds demand it. Mastering this terror is not cruelty, it is mastery of perception. It is not deception, it is restraint. To be unreadable, you must first detach from the need for approval, validation, or explanation. You must exist according to your own rhythm, your own logic, your own desires, without catering to the interpretive needs of others. And in doing so, you create a gravitational field that pulls others toward you. They do not know why they are drawn. They only know that their attention is yours, whether you command it or simply allow it. Observe the patterns of those who fail in ambiguity. They overexplain, overcompensate, overexpose. Every weakness they reveal gives others footholds. Every story they tell limits their autonomy. Every confession narrows the mystery that might have captivated. By contrast, the unreadable thrives in restraint. Every unspoken word, every concealed thought, every withheld reaction is a thread weaving fascination, obsession, and power. The unreadable is never desperate. It is never predictable. It is the shadow that moves through the room, unnoticed yet inescapable. Ambiguity is also seductive. People are drawn not to what they fully understand, but to what stimulates imagination. The unreadable invites projection. Others place their desires, fears, and fantasies into the void you create. They co-author your persona in their minds, and in doing so, they bind themselves to you. The unreadable transforms passivity into participation. You do not create obsession. They do on your canvas of restraint and absence. You simply allow it to happen. Yet there is danger in misunderstanding the unreadable. It is not manipulation for manipulation's sake. It is not cruelty for the ego. Its power comes from subtlety, from precision, from psychological elegance. Those who wield it recklessly may provoke fear without fascination, dread without desire. To be unreadable is to command attention and respect simultaneously. It is to exist as a presence that unsettles without threatening, intrigues without coercing, fascinates without explaining. It is the perfect balance between shadow and substance. Consider every interaction as a chessboard. The unreadable player does not reveal strategy, does not defend pieces unnecessarily, does not justify moves. The world attempts to predict, reacts, falters, and in that hesitation, control is seized. Power is not demonstrated, it is absorbed by those who cannot escape its gravitational pull. The unreadable moves through life, not with noise, but with resonance. Others resonate with the emptiness you leave, the space you maintain, and the mystery you refuse to dispel. The terror of the unreadable is a gift, if wielded wisely. It is the weapon of those who understand human psychology at its rawest. It is the allure of the void, the seduction of silence, the authority of restraint. When humans cannot read you, they cannot challenge you, cannot anticipate you, and cannot escape you. And as they obsess, as they speculate, as they project, the unreadable ascends, quietly, inexorably, to the seat of silent power. If you wish to master influence, do not speak to clarify, do not reveal to control, do not explain to appease. Learn instead to exist as a riddle, a shadow, an enigma that the mind cannot contain. Let your presence unsettle without menace, intrigue without disclosure, dominate without declaration. The terror of the unreadable is the terror of true power, the kind that requires no justification, no narration, no validation. The unreadable is freedom, and those who encounter it cannot help but bow, not in submission to you, but to the space you create in their own minds. The unreadable does not chase. The unreadable waits, the unreadable observes, and in the silent terror it inspires, the world bends. Not with force, but with fascination. Silence is no longer empty. The unreadable has filled it. Chapter 3. Authority through absence. Presence is overrated. Learn why absence can command devotion. The most dangerous power is the power of what is not there. Humanity worships presence, yet it is absence that shapes desire, molds attention, and bends the will. When someone is too visible, too eager, too accessible, they become ordinary, replaceable, and ultimately irrelevant. But when someone withdraws, when they cultivate a deliberate void, they become inevitable. They are not noticed. They are remembered. They do not compete. They dominate. Distance is not merely physical. It is psychological, emotional, and even temporal. It is the art of creating space in a world desperate for immediacy. When you do not chase, when you do not explain, when you resist the compulsion to satisfy every demand for attention, you allow others' minds to expand into the vacuum you leave. They will think of you when you are gone. They will imagine your intentions when you are silent. They will obsess over your absence in ways that presence could never provoke. The human mind cannot resist what it cannot grasp, and this is the crucible of authority through absence. Controlled withdrawal is not neglect. Neglect is laziness, carelessness, or indifference. Neglect rots influence. It creates disdain. Controlled withdrawal, by contrast, is deliberate. It is a slow, calculated removal from visibility, from availability, from expectation. It signals value without stating it. It creates a rhythm, a tension, a push and pull that mirrors the deepest desires of those who notice. The difference is subtle but lethal. Neglect repels, absence seduces. One is forgotten, the other is unforgettable. Consider how the world reacts to scarcity. An object in abundance is devalued. A voice that is always heard loses its weight. But a presence that is felt in fleeting moments, a word spoken sparingly, a glance offered like a gift, these are instruments of authority. The same principle applies to human interaction. By withdrawing strategically, by resisting the urge to fill every silence with your voice, you teach others to seek you, to need you, to assign meaning to your occasional appearances. Absence becomes your amplifier. The less you are there, the more they yearn for you. Those who do not chase are pursued. It is a paradox that the world struggles to understand. The more you are available, the less you are desired. The more you pursue, the more you reveal weakness, and desire turns to contempt. But when you retreat, when you hold back, when you vanish into quietude, the hunter becomes the hunted. People will project onto you, constructing fantasies and assumptions that elevate you beyond reality. You do not bend to their expectations. They bend to the gravitational pull of your absence. Absence is a psychological catalyst. It ignites imagination, provokes longing, and forces reflection. When someone is constantly present, they are dissected, analyzed, and eventually judged. But when someone appears selectively, unpredictably, the mind attempts to fill the gaps. Every silence becomes a canvas for obsession. Every unexplained departure becomes a puzzle. The brain cannot resist solving. Authority through absence is the art of becoming essential without being ubiquitous, of haunting without haunting, of occupying a space in the mind that is reserved only for you. This principle works across all dimensions of power, professional, social, romantic. In leadership, a manager who micromanages loses authority. One who delegates and retreats strategically commands loyalty. In friendship, the person who is always available becomes background noise. The one whose presence is earned becomes treasured. In desire, the lover who overwhelms, who chases, who explains too much is abandoned. The one who withdraws with precision becomes irresistible. Distance transforms ordinary interactions into rituals of anticipation, and anticipation is the most potent amplifier of influence. Yet wielding absence requires restraint, patience, and psychological insight. Retreat too far, too long, and you become irrelevant. Withdraw without intention, and the void becomes empty, a space that others ignore rather than cherish. Absence must be deliberate, measured, and timed according to the psychological landscape of those you seek to influence. The art lies not in hiding completely, but in revealing only fragments, glimpses, shadows that draw attention without satisfying curiosity. Each disappearance must feel meaningful, each return inevitable. Authority through absence also exploits the human fear of loss. People are subconsciously driven to protect what might disappear. When you remove yourself from immediate access, the brain interprets it as potential deprivation. Suddenly, every memory of you, every interaction, every detail becomes amplified. Desire is no longer a simple want. It becomes an urgent need, a subtle obsession, a compulsive thought pattern. In the mind of others, you are no longer a person. They are tethered to an idea, a projection, an untouchable standard. The unreadable and the absent are complementary forces. Where unreadable cultivates mystery within presence, absence amplifies the power of what is missing. Both induce obsession, but absence carries the added weight of anticipation. While unreadable unsettles and confounds, absence torments and seduces. Together, they form a psychological ecosystem in which attention, desire, and authority flow inexorably toward the one who knows the rules of silence and withdrawal. Even the slightest hint of reappearance after absence can create an almost hypnotic response. A message sent after days of silence, a smile offered after weeks of restraint, a glance caught across a crowded room after months of distance. These moments become seismic events in the emotional landscape of those observing you. They assign significance to what you offer, precisely because it was denied for so long. Absence does not merely protect value. It creates it, magnifies it, and commands tribute from those who recognize it. Absence is also a mirror. In withdrawing, you force others to confront their own need for connection, attention, and meaning. The void you leave becomes a canvas for their insecurities, desires, and projections. They reveal themselves in trying to fill it. They chase shadows of your presence, unaware that their pursuit has been orchestrated by nothing more than silence, distance, and the deliberate shaping of expectation. You never act to manipulate directly. You act to allow the mind of others to ensnare itself in your absence. Yet there is danger in misjudging timing. Too much presence destroys mystery. Too much withdrawal erodes relevance. Authority through absence is not a game of extremes. It is a dance of rhythm, of pacing, of subtle signaling. You must feel the currents of attention, gauge the tides of expectation, and adjust your visibility accordingly. It is an intimate knowledge of psychology, applied to the art of spacing oneself in a world addicted to immediacy. Ultimately, the lesson is clear. Those who chase, explain, and crowd lose. Those who retreat, withhold, and vanish gain. Authority is less about presence than the absence that defines it. People are not drawn to those who surround them. They are drawn to those who elude them. The power of absence is the power to make yourself indispensable, not by being constant, but by being rare, deliberate, and psychologically unavoidable. Learn this and you command attention. Learn this and you cultivate obsession. Learn this and you exist as a force beyond explanation, beyond pursuit, beyond ordinary comprehension. Presence is noise. Absence is gravity. Presence is fleeting, absence is eternal. The world does not chase those who explain, it chases those who vanish. And in the void you create, your authority is absolute. Chapter 4. What silence says without speaking. The absence of words can speak louder than any scream. Silence is a language few understand, yet everyone responds to. It is not emptiness. It is a vessel, a weapon, a mirror, a trap. In the quiet, the mind projects fears, desires, and judges. In silence, power breathes. Words are mortal, fleeting, and easily manipulated. Silence is eternal, imprinted, unavoidable. It shapes perception more deeply than the loudest declaration. It defines presence not by what is said, but by what is withheld. Observe the world. Those who speak constantly are often the weakest. Their voices scramble to convince, justify, or impress. Their words, though plentiful, leave little impact. But those who master silence cast shadows that linger. Every pause, every hesitation, every measured absence of speech is a signal. It is interpreted in ways the speaker may never intend. Yet these interpretations are the very substance of influence. The unconscious mind listens, always, and silence feeds it with a richness words can never provide. Silence is ambiguous, and ambiguity terrifies humans. We are creatures who crave clarity, explanation, resolution. When we are confronted with quiet, the brain panics. It begins to construct narratives, fill voids, invent motives, and imagine consequences. The less you say, the more others think you wield power. The more they try to decode your intentions, the more control you exert. Silence is a psychological amplifier. It magnifies perceptions, heightens anxieties, and compels attention without effort. Unspoken communication is everywhere, yet few recognize it. A glance held too long, a nod withheld, a reaction delayed. These are languages of authority, subtle and devastating. Confidence is rarely stated. It is shown through the absence of apology, the refusal to explain, the refusal to over-participate in the conversation. Condemnation is rarely shouted. It seeps through the stillness, a pause pregnant with judgment, a gaze unblinking, a response deliberately postponed. The conscious mind may not register these cues, but the unconscious does, and it reacts with loyalty, fear, desire, or obedience. The power of silence is amplified by human insecurity. People are constantly evaluating themselves, measuring worth, gauging reactions. When confronted with a person who speaks little, they begin to doubt their own perceptions. Every subtle gesture, every withheld comment becomes magnified. They start to search for hidden meaning where none may exist. The mind, desperate to impose order, tributes weight and significance to every pause. By saying nothing, you compel others to interpret, to invest, to respond, and in doing so, you direct the flow of thought and emotion without ever raising your voice. Silence is also a mirror. In quiet moments, people reveal themselves. They talk to fill it, gesture to compensate for it, over-explain to master it, and in their attempts, they betray weaknesses, fears, and desires. The more you remain silent, the more they reveal, the more you learn. Every conversation is not a mutual exchange, but an excavation. Your silence forces the truth from others, layer by layer. Those who master silence extract information effortlessly, without interrogation, without confrontation. The world, in its compulsion to speak, becomes a repository of its own secrets. Yet silence is not passive. It is active. It exerts pressure subtly, unrelentingly. Consider how stillness affects a room. When one person stops contributing, others feel compelled to fill the void. Anxiety rises, minds become alert, senses sharpened. The unspoken command of silence is irresistible. It forces engagement on the terms of the silent observer. Those who remain verbal, constant, and loud surrender their power without realizing it, while those who know how to wield quietness extract influence with surgical precision. The unconscious meanings behind silence are almost infinite. Silence can signify confidence, a refusal to justify oneself, a belief that presence alone suffices. Silence can signify threat, a deliberate withholding of approval or attention. Silence can signify disdain, a withdrawal of energy from those unworthy of it. Silence can signify intrigue, the promise of more never fully revealed. Every interpretation is controlled by the observer's mind, yet orchestrated entirely by your own restraint. Power resides not in what is given, but in what is denied. Subtle cues compound the effects of silence. A shift in posture, a deliberate stillness, a carefully timed pause before responding. all speak volumes. These cues are often invisible to the conscious eye but resonate in the limbic system, stirring instincts before rational thought intervenes. The brain encodes silence as a signal of importance. It cannot ignore the person who withholds, delays, or merely exists without compulsion. Over time, the accumulation of silent cues creates a psychological gravity impossible to resist. Presence becomes psychological, not physical. Influence is exerted without coercion, and obedience is inspired without demand. But silence is dangerous if mishandled. Too much silence can alienate, confuse, or provoke frustration. Too little, and you are drowned in the noise of those who speak endlessly. The art is balance, to speak just enough to remain understood, but to remain enigmatic, to guide perception while remaining unseen. The rhythm of speech and quietness is a weapon of influence. Words are bullets, and silence is the gun itself. Every carefully timed pause amplifies what is said. Every withheld comment deepens the mystery. Every unspoken thought extends the power beyond comprehension. Silence is also an anchor for emotional manipulation. In tension and uncertainty, in moments of conflict, the quiet mind exerts control over the reactive mind. When someone expects a reaction, a rebuttal, an explanation, and none comes, they are destabilized. They search for answers, invent scenarios, and ultimately bend to the presence of the one who observes silently. Here, authority is not asserted through argument, but through the existential discomfort of the other, which you shape simply by not speaking. Ultimately, silence is the architecture of unseen dominance. Those who understand it create a reality that others inhabit unconsciously. They move through conversations and relationships like shadows, leaving impressions that linger long after words are forgotten. They are architects of perception, masters of interpretation, and sculptors of desire, all without uttering a single unnecessary syllable. The loudest voices in a room may dominate the moment, but the silent ones echo in memory, imagination, and subconscious influence indefinitely. In the world of influence, speaking is cheap, noise is abundant, and attention is fleeting. Silence, by contrast, is rare, deliberate, and invaluable. Those who cultivate it do not merely communicate, they compel. They do not merely exist, they dominate. The unspoken becomes a force, the quiet becomes a presence, and the observer becomes the arbiter of desire, judgment, and authority. Learn to wield silence, and you wield power beyond explanation. Every word you withhold, every glance unreturned, every pause extended, these are your instruments. Every moment you resist the urge to fill the void is a step toward mastery. The world reacts to sound, but it worships absence. Speak little and influence endlessly. Remain silent and command the unseen. What silence says without speaking is far more enduring, far more seductive, and far more lethal than anything spoken aloud. Chapter 5. Emotional Withholding and Control. The heart that reveals too much loses its throne. Emotions are weapons. They are the currency of influence, the invisible threads that bind human attention. Yet most give them away recklessly, on demand, on impulse, in a desperate attempt to be seen, to be understood, to be loved. To surrender emotional energy too freely is to surrender power itself. The weak believe that revealing their inner world creates connection. The strong know that connection is drawn, like iron to magnet, not offered. In emotional withholding lies control, precision, and unseen authority. Observe the desperate. They are loud, insistent, transparent. Their joy is performative, their sorrow public, their desire blatant. They are predictable, readable, and ultimately powerless. Every exhaled feeling is a revelation of need, every uncontrolled reaction a map of vulnerability. Others see them fully, but they themselves are empty of leverage. Emotional overexpression is a form of surrender, a declaration that one can be moved, influenced, or manipulated. Those who master restraint, by contrast, are enigmas. They are storms contained behind a calm surface, oceans of potential energy that command attention without a single word. The strength of emotional restraint is underestimated because it is silent, unseen, and unmeasured. Yet it governs rooms, dominates conversations, and molds relationships. It is the quiet pulse beneath the surface that others feel before they understand it. Composure, when maintained at the right intensity, is intoxicating. It communicates authority, stability, and inscrutability. It tells the observer, I am complete, I need nothing, You may approach, but on my terms. There is a subtle terror in this. People fear what they cannot influence, and restraint makes influence almost impossible to achieve. Coldness is not cruelty, it is clarity. It is not indifference, it is strategy. The cold person is aware of every emotional move, measuring, weighing, calibrating. Their expressions are deliberate, their reactions controlled. They never react to provoke, please, or console unnecessarily. They create a rhythm of unpredictability where the observer is never certain how much will be revealed or withheld. This uncertainty produces fascination. People are drawn to those who regulate their emotional world because it promises mastery, and mastery inspires desire, fear, and respect in equal measure. The act of withholding is an art. It is not silence alone, nor is it stoicism for its own sake. It is intentional absence of reaction, measured detachment, a refusal to indulge external pressures. When others expect an emotional response to be comforted, reassured, or flattered, withholding shifts the power. The observer begins to chase the unspent energy, to invest themselves in ways that serve you rather than the other way around. Neediness dissolves influence. Composure preserves it. The less you surrender, the more others contribute unwittingly to your psychological dominion. Overexpression is often a mask for insecurity. When someone smiles too wide, laughs too loud, cries too easily, or apologizes too quickly, they reveal a hidden dependency on approval. Approval, attention, or affection becomes their master. They are chained to the reactions of others, and thus their influence is limited. Emotional withholding, however, frees the mind to operate strategically. The restrained individual is not driven by external validation. They are driven by purpose, timing, and the subtle orchestration of perception. They measure their emotional output like a general rationing ammunition. Never wasted, always precise, always devastating when applied. Observe interactions carefully. People are addicted to reaction. They crave feedback. In conversations, they seek signs of approval, hints of understanding, evidence of emotional reciprocity. Withholding response creates a vacuum. The observer, desperate to fill it, will project their desires, fears, and expectations onto you. This projection is the cornerstone of emotional leverage. You need say nothing. The mind of the other does all the work, revealing inner truths, insecurities, and motivations without your interference. Control is exerted not through domination, but through calculated absence. Coldness, when coupled with restraint, becomes seductive. It draws the mind, not the body, into your orbit. Desire is psychological before it is physical. People are fascinated not by what you do, but by what you do not do. The restrained person creates suspense, tension, and mystery. Every unexpressed thought is a thread, every withheld feeling a lever. The more the world tries to decipher, predict, or influence you, the deeper your hold becomes. Emotional restraint transforms presence into gravity. It is subtle, invisible, yet irresistible. Yet emotional control is not isolation. It is not the avoidance of feeling, but the mastery of it. To withhold is to maintain authority over your own interior world, to choose which reactions are given and which are denied. To feel intensely, but show selectively, is to hold a mirror to others, one that reflects what they most desire or fear, rather than what you overtly wish to communicate. Those who lack this skill scatter their influence. Those who master it compress their power into concentrated, invisible force. The world moves toward them without knowing why. The paradox of restraint is this. The less you give, the more you receive. The more controlled your expressions, the more attention, effort, and desire are invested in you. People chase, beg, and imagine in ways that strengthen your position. They reveal their own vulnerabilities, fears, and secrets in the act of pursuing you. They invest themselves in your orbit without any explicit demand. Power grows silently, invisibly, yet it is absolute. Those who cannot understand it mistake it for aloofness, arrogance, or cruelty. But in truth, it is mastery of self and influence over others. Mastery of emotional withholding requires patience, observation, and relentless discipline. Impulses must be tempered. Reactions must be measured. Every expression, smile, sigh, or glance is an instrument. Even minor breaches of composure must be accounted for, as small leaks erode perception over time. Yet the reward is profound. The restrained mind moves through social currents like a shadow beneath the surface. Invisible yet shaping every wave, unseen yet altering every trajectory. In the theater of human interaction, those who express everything are actors. Those who withhold are directors. They pull strings, orchestrate tension, and stage outcomes without ever appearing on stage themselves. They understand that emotion, when wielded carelessly, is noise. But emotion, when withheld strategically, is the architecture of power. Every pause, every glance, every unspoken thought is a beam, a column, a foundation. And those who understand this build invisible empires, psychological fortresses that others cannot breach, because their keys are not visible and their doors never appear to exist. In conclusion, emotional withholding is the quiet mastery of influence. Overexpression dissolves authority. Composure strengthens it. Coldness, when deliberate and disciplined, becomes magnetic. By choosing what to reveal and what to conceal, you shape perception, manipulate attention, and orchestrate desire. The world believes it chases, but in reality, it moves to the rhythm you dictate, silent, deliberate, unstoppable. The strongest power is not loud, not demanding, not desperate. It is withheld, and in withholding you become untouchable. Chapter 6. Stillness and Psychological Gravity. Those who cannot bear the pause will reveal everything. Stillness is not absence. It is presence magnified. In a world that thrums with noise, chatter, and restless movement, the motionless figure becomes a beacon, a center of gravity, a subtle command no one admits to noticing, yet cannot ignore. Humans are drawn to motion, to sound, to rhythm, but they are hypnotized by stillness, captivated by the calm that refuses to flinch. Silence may be loud, but stillness is heavier. It bends attention, shifts energy, and rewrites expectation. Observe the room. Those who move without pause fill the space, but they do not dominate it. They are absorbed, like water into sand. Those who slow themselves, who measure every step, every gesture, every breath, bend the environment to their will. Every glance held, every pause extended, is an unspoken message. I am the rhythm you are following. The subtlety is brutal. No commands are given, no arguments made. Yet the mind cannot escape the gravitational pull of controlled stillness. Motionlessness is not the absence of action. It is the mastery of timing. There is a psychological force in the ability to delay, to linger, to withhold movement until it is most impactful. Every gesture becomes meaningful. Every word carries weight. Every breath a signal. The room reacts unconsciously. Conversations slow. Minds lean in. Awareness sharpens. Those untrained in the power of stillness feel discomfort. The eyes wander. The pulse rises. Anxiety flares. Humans are addicted to activity, but deprived of it. They fill the void with obsession, speculation, and projection. Stillness forces revelation without a single question being asked. Controlling rhythm is subtle, almost invisible, but it is a form of dominance. The pace of speech, the timing of response, the delay before movement all create a hidden hierarchy. Those who accelerate, who fill space, who react instantly, cede authority to the rhythm of others. Those who decelerate, who hold moments, who control the timing of everything around them, dictate the flow of attention and desire. In stillness, you are the heartbeat of the room. Your tempo becomes unspoken law. Others stumble, rush, and strain to match it without realizing they are following you. The psychology of stillness is merciless. Humans are pattern seekers. They crave consistency and predictability. When someone refuses to move according to the expected cadence, the brain experiences subtle panic. It seeks to decode, to predict, to impose order. But stillness is chaos contained. In order no algorithm can measure. Minds race to fill the silence, to interpret every micro-expression, every tremor of muscle, every flicker of the eye. In doing so, they surrender power. They become obsessed not with the silent figure itself, but with what that figure represents. Mastery, self-command, unknowable intent. Slow down, and the world accelerates in your presence. When others hurry, you linger. When others speak impulsively, you pause. When the world demands reaction, you resist. This resistance is magnetic. It unsettles. It demands attention. People are drawn to it even when they resist. They perceive composure as strength, patience as wisdom, stillness as dominance. And in the shadows of their own restlessness, they begin to follow, to anticipate, to serve without a single explicit direction. Stillness is also a mirror. By holding yourself in controlled motionlessness, you reflect the unspoken anxieties, desires, and expectations of those around you. They project onto you because the brain cannot tolerate the unknown. Every unbroken pause is an invitation to fill in gaps, to reveal truths, to disclose thoughts and emotions they would otherwise guard. You do not ask, pry, or manipulate. Their own minds betray them, and you are the quiet observer, the patient recipient, the silent architect of revelation. The gravity of stillness is cumulative. One held glance, one delayed step, one extended pause compounds. The room bends subtly toward you. Conversations bend, movements bend, attention bends. Others adjust their tempo consciously or unconsciously to accommodate the rhythm you enforce. This is invisible control. It is psychological seduction without seduction. It is dominance without threat. It is the quietest form of power, yet the most absolute. Those who cannot recognize it are entranced. Those who attempt to resist are ensnared. Stillness is not inert. It is tension made tangible. It is a wire stretched between you and the world, vibrating with unseen energy. Every eye drawn, every pulse heightened, every thought sharpened is evidence of your control. The room becomes elastic, responsive, pliable to your will. Presence without movement is a weapon sharper than any blade. It slices through distraction, cuts through noise, and leaves only focus in its wake. Those who fail to respect it reveal weakness, agitation, and desire without being prompted. The power of slowing the room extends beyond observation. It extends into anticipation. When you move, the impact is magnified because it contrasts with the stillness that preceded it. A step, a word, a gesture, a sigh. Suddenly, it resonates like thunder in a silent cathedral. Stillness creates the architecture of influence. Motion merely traverses it. Control lies not in what you do, but in how long you wait to do it, how carefully you calibrate the tempo, how deliberately you allow the world to adjust to your rhythm before giving form to action. Those who misunderstand stillness perceive it as apathy, arrogance, or indecision. They are wrong. Stillness is strategy incarnate. It is preparation made visible, discipline rendered tangible, intent without articulation. To master it is to command perception, to dictate attention, to bend human response like iron under pressure. In a culture of impulsivity, the patient become monarchs. In a world of distraction, the silent observer rules. In conclusion, stillness is a psychological instrument, subtle yet devastating. Motionlessness dominates because humans cannot resist filling it, cannot avoid being drawn into it, cannot ignore the power it exerts. Control rhythm, pace, and timing, and you control the room. Slow the world around you and the room bends. Attention, fascination, and influence are not begged. They are summoned by gravity alone. In the art of stillness, the unspoken is stronger than the shouted. The unmoved commands more than the rushing. The silent orchestrates more than the vocal. And in mastering this, you hold the invisible reins of power, untouchable, undeniable, irresistible. Chapter 7. Over-explanation as submission. Those who cannot restrain their tongue surrender everything without knowing it. Words are powerful, but their overuse is lethal. It is the subtle confession of insecurity, a whisper of weakness masked as clarity. Those who speak too much reveal more than they intend. They disclose the fractures beneath the surface, the tremors of doubt, the trembling desire for acceptance. Over-explanation is not communication, it is surrender. It is the unconscious submission of one who fears the silence of judgment, who cannot bear the weight of uncertainty in the eyes of others. Observe the insecure speaker. Every sentence is a plea. Every justification is a bridge extended toward validation. They attempt to convince not the world but themselves, that they matter, that their intentions are pure, that their existence is warranted. But the more they explain, the thinner the mask becomes, the more the cracks appear, and the more their authority dissolves. Confidence does not defend itself with words. It radiates, silent, undeniable, unassailable. Over-explanation is the antithesis of power. It is the subtle signal that control has been lost, that the mind quivers, that the ego is exposed. There is a profound irony here. Those most desperate to be understood are often the least comprehensible. Their excessive words act like a flood, drowning meaning in a torrent of justification. Listeners are overwhelmed, not enlightened. The mind cannot absorb the chaos of self-defense. It cannot locate certainty amidst the noise. And in this overflow, the speaker's power leaks away, unnoticed by most, yet devastating in its psychological effect. The moment someone begins to justify every action, every thought, every feeling, they are silently kneeling before the observer, offering submission without ceremony. Justification is an unconscious apology. Every phrase beginning with, "I meant" or "I didn't," or "you must understand" is a plea disguised as explanation. The insecure do not trust that their presence, their choices, their very being is sufficient. They attempt to patch perception with words, to bind opinion with rationale, to buy acceptance with explanation. But acceptance cannot be purchased. It can only be commanded through presence, control, and the careful calibration of silence. To explain is to reveal that you feel unsafe in your own skin, that you require external consent for internal validation. In the shadow of over-explanation, the mind of the observer becomes the stage, and the speaker, unwittingly, the performer stripped bare. Words reveal fear more than any action ever could. The trembling of the tongue, the hesitations, the compulsive rationalizations, all betray an underlying anxiety, a psychological tremor that betrays intent and character. Those who over-explain are revealing what they cannot admit, the fragility of belief in themselves, the insecurity of their position, the instability of their control. Fear is the uninvited companion of the verbose. It sits in every pause, it lurks between every syllable, it pulses beneath every sentence. And the observer, silent, patient, attuned, feels it, senses it, and adjusts the balance of power accordingly. Notice the subtle mechanics of over-explanation. Each addition of because or actually or in reality acts as a self-inflicted weakening. Every attempt to clarify or justify or rationalize is a micro-surrender of authority. The insecure believe they are strengthening their position, but in truth, they are bending, yielding, collapsing. Their narrative is a net, cast to capture trust, yet it ensnares only their own vulnerability. And those who have mastered the silence, the patient, the observant, the unmoved, watch as the cage builds itself around the speaker. Power is never declared in excess, it is hinted, implied, reserved. To need to explain is to prove that power has already slipped. The mind of the insecure speaker is a battleground. Each thought is weighed, measured, and transmitted with anxious anticipation of judgment. Every word is an attempt to predict, to preempt, to prevent criticism. Yet paradoxically, the more they attempt to control perception through speech, the less they control anything. They are caught in the compulsive cycle of explanation, their mental energy spent on defending presence rather than commanding it. And the observer senses the absence of true authority, the lack of inner certainty, the unspoken cry for validation. Over-explanation is not persuasive. It is contagious, spreading the insecurity of the speaker to those around them, corrupting respect, fascination, and desire with a subtle taint of weakness. Silence, in contrast, is mastery. It is the unmovable proof of self-assurance, the quiet defiance of external judgment, the psychological magnetism of those who owe no answers. The patient still figure does not justify, it simply exists. Every glance, every pause, every carefully measured action communicates more than paragraphs of reasoning could ever hope to achieve. The world leans in to understand, hypothesize, and speculate. The insecure, by contrast, exhaust themselves in the futile attempt to preempt questions, to anticipate judgment, to construct meaning externally. Their surrender is audible, visible, undeniable. Even more devastating is the secondary effect of over-explanation. It forces others to lead. When one dominates conversation with clarifications, rationalizations, and justifications, the listener assumes control. They guide the narrative, set the emotional tempo, and dictate response. The over-explainer hands power away while believing they are asserting it. The psychological transaction is invisible but total. Submission disguised as expression. And those who understand the dynamics of restraint exploit this instinctively, letting the over-explainer betray themselves without intervention, without confrontation, without need for argument. Observe also the emotional exhaustion that follows compulsive justification. Each added detail, each reiteration of intent, each attempt to anticipate misinterpretation consumes energy that could otherwise be directed toward true influence. The insecure speaker loses clarity, loses composure, loses subtlety. Their emotional state becomes erratic, reactive, and transparent. In contrast, the restrained mind, the silent observer, channels minimal action into maximal effect. The economy of influence is the hallmark of power. The less spent, the more preserved, the more commanding. Over-explanation is the antithesis of this law. In conclusion, over-explaining is the signature of submission, the unspoken confession of insecurity, and the unconscious erosion of authority. It exposes fear, weakens presence, and surrenders influence to those who know the value of silence. To speak excessively is to bend before judgment. To justify repeatedly is to beg for approval. To reveal fear is to relinquish control. Those who understand this dynamic wield influence effortlessly. They speak sparingly, act decisively, and allow silence to amplify their presence. In a world addicted to noise, restraint is power. In a society enthralled by speech, silence commands. Over-explanation is not persuasion, it is the quietest form of surrender. Mastering this law is mastering subtle dominance. Observe the compulsive need to justify, recognize the cracks it exposes, and let it unfold without interference. Your power is magnified not by what you say, but by what you do not. Those who explain too much are already beneath your gaze, and the only remaining question is whether they will notice, or whether they will forever remain entrapped by their own need to rationalize. Chapter 8. Transparency and Psychological Exposure. The more you reveal, the less you exist in the eyes of others. Transparency is a seduction disguised as virtue. It is lauded as honesty, praised as integrity, yet it hides a lethal vulnerability. Every confession, every revelation, every disclosed thought is a window not just into your mind, but into the hands of those who are waiting to consume it. Emotional honesty is not neutral. It is a weapon for others, a tool that transforms openness into leverage. Those who parade their feelings believe they are building trust, connection, intimacy. In reality, they are feeding observers, sharpening their psychological claws, and surrendering their unseen edges to scrutiny. Notice the mechanics of transparency. Each shared worry, each spoken doubt, each expression of need is absorbed by others and repurposed. Observers, silent, calculating, patient, do not merely hear. They map, they measure, they predict. They catalog your reactions, trace your weaknesses, and learn where your influence falters. To expose emotion is to lay your mind bare upon a table where no one cares for consent. Openness becomes a kind of auction. And every fragment of self you reveal is currency to be spent, manipulated, and consumed. Those who embrace transparency without caution are unaware of the power shift. The act of revealing transforms the dynamic between speaker and listener. Whereas previously presence and mystery commanded attention, now the exposed mind submits. Vulnerability, when offered indiscriminately, is no longer an invitation. It is an endowment to the strategic observer. Every disclosed feeling becomes leverage for influence, every honest admission a tool for manipulation. Transparency in the hands of the uncalculated is self-erasure. Even when the intention is noble, the consequences are unforgiving. Emotional honesty is never neutral in the theater of human interaction. It is a map, a roadmap for those who seek advantage. Confidence is not revealed, it is perceived. Strength is not explained, it is assumed. The mind that lays itself bare gives power away while believing it is fortifying connection. The paradox is elegant and cruel. Those who reveal the most are the most exploited, yet they remain blind to their submission. They mistake empathy for safety, disclosure for influence, and openness for mastery. Observe the consumption of exposed emotion. People are drawn not to the substance of what is shared, but to the opportunity it provides. A confessed fear becomes a lever, a disclosed longing a key, an emotional crack a door. Those who understand human desire and vulnerability absorb these revelations, dissect them, and utilize them to bend the mind of the revealed. Transparency is not a shield, it is a sieve. Every layer of self offered freely seeps into the hands of those who know how to extract its power. The more you disclose, the more you are digested, understood, and ultimately controlled. This is not merely a psychological truth, it is a law of influence. The silent observer, the patient manipulator, the calculated strategist knows that information is power. Every voluntary disclosure is a gift. Every act of emotional honesty a surrender. The exposed are not powerful, they are visible. Visibility is not mastery. Presence is not control. When you reveal the inner workings of your mind, you convert yourself into data. Predictable, measurable, manipulable. The mind that hides is the mind that rules. The one that discloses is the mind that yields. There is a subtle seduction in openness, a temptation to trust, a lure of shared humanity. Yet this temptation is the exact point where power is stolen. Empathy, emotional honesty, and vulnerability are double-edged swords. They connect, yes, but they also expose. They allure, yes, but they also bleed. The observer, ever watchful, does not resist the invitation. They lean in. They lean in. Each confession is a rope, and each rope can be pulled, tightened, or cut at will. Those who speak without calculating the weight of their revelations are already ensnared. Even in professional or personal arenas, the principle remains identical. Over-disclosure creates a psychological deficit. One cannot hold influence while offering the raw, unprotected self. Leaders who reveal too much lose authority. Friends who disclose too freely invite manipulation. Lovers who share unguarded emotion yield advantage. The more transparent the individual, the more their emotional landscape becomes a canvas for others' projection, control, and ownership. Vulnerability is not inherently attractive. It is inherently exploitable. Contrast this with strategic opacity. Silence, measured revelation, selective honesty. These are the tools of the psychologically powerful. To withhold is not deceit, it is mastery. To choose what to reveal and when is to bend perception without raising awareness. The mind that remains partially unreadable captivates, commands, and protects simultaneously. By contrast, the fully transparent mind is a field left open to harvest. Transparency without strategy is surrender. Openness without control is collapse. The danger is subtle, almost invisible. Settle that those who are honest believe themselves immune to exploitation. They mistake the act of sharing for an act of power. They imagine that honesty disarms the observer, that clarity frees them from scrutiny. Yet the opposite is true. Clarity without discretion magnifies vulnerability, illuminates weakness, and accelerates consumption. The more the inner world is revealed, the more influence is ceded. Emotional exposure is the quiet death of autonomy, the subtle eclipse of self. To survive in a world attuned to leverage, one must learn the paradox. The strongest presence is not the loudest, the clearest, or the most transparent. The strongest presence is measured, deliberate, and impenetrable. It is the figure who allows glimpses without confession, who suggests without declaration, who guides without explanation. In this economy of attention, overexposure is bankruptcy. Silence, subtlety, and selective revelation are the currency of dominion. Those who fail to guard themselves against the seductive lure of transparency will discover that honesty is not safety, it is surrender. In conclusion, transparency and psychological exposure are the hidden traps of influence. Emotional honesty, when unchecked, transforms from virtue to vulnerability. Openness invites consumption, confession yields leverage, and revealed emotion becomes a tool for manipulation. Power is never in what is disclosed. It is in what is protected, in what is hinted at, and in what is deliberately withheld. The observer does not need explanation. They need access, and overexposure provides it freely. Those who master restraint, the art of selective reveal, and the economy of presence navigate human interaction with unseen authority. Those who do not are consumed, dissected, and quietly dominated by their own unveiled hearts. Transparency is seductive, yes, but only in the hands of those who understand its danger. For everyone else, it is a slow surrender, an invisible death of control, a quiet slavery of the psyche. Chapter 9. Noise, Attention, and Desperation. The louder they scream, the less they command. Noise is not power, it is a confession. The cacophony of constant talking, posting, performing, or declaring is not a sign of strength. It is a plea, a signal of internal scarcity, a desperate call for validation. Humanity has an insatiable hunger for recognition, but the way it manifests often betrays its true nature. Those who feel compelled to be seen, to be heard, to dominate the auditory and visual landscape are revealing a void they cannot fill. Noise is a language of need, not authority. Observe the desperation beneath the sound. Every raised voice, every repeated opinion, every overt display of competence is a subtle declaration. I exist. I matter. I am present. The mind that constantly signals its existence is haunted by the terror of invisibility. It fears irrelevance more than failure. The louder one tries to assert importance. The more apparent it becomes that respect, influence, and authority are absent. Visibility becomes a substitute for value. Attention is shallow currency, and recognition a temporary illusion. In social arenas, noise often masquerades as leadership. People mistake confidence for volume, substance for frequency, dominance for repetition. Yet the psychology beneath the surface is fragile. Loudness is rarely strategic, it is reactive. It responds to perceived neglect, imagined slights, or the hunger for acknowledgement. Those who rely on noise to define themselves are tethered to the perception of others, rather than anchored in their own presence. The louder they attempt to be, the more dependent they are on external confirmation, and the more their internal weakness is revealed. Consider the pattern. The brain equates noise with attention, and attention with value. Yet in the silent calculus of influence, the inverse is true. True authority does not scream, it does not demand validation. It exists in the subtle pull, the quiet gravity that draws others in without effort. Noise is a substitute, a facade, a desperate mask that hides the absence of real psychological weight. Those who fill every space with sound are, in truth, fleeing the silence that would expose their emptiness. Desperation has a smell, and it manifests in behavior. The compulsive poster, the incessant talker, the one who must be constantly seen is trapped in a loop of reassurance seeking. Each act of visibility is a temporary bomb, a fleeting confirmation of existence, quickly exhausted and requiring repetition. The mind becomes addicted to recognition, dependent on the gaze of others, and blind to the power that comes from restraint. Noise replaces reflection, spectacle replaces substance, validation replaces mastery. Loudness erodes respect because it signals imbalance. Power that needs constant affirmation is power that does not exist internally. Visibility without grounding is hollow. People may pay attention, but attention is not influence. They may observe, but observation is not respect. The desperate seek to fill a vacuum in themselves with the awareness of others. Yet this effort only enlarges the void. Every scream for recognition confirms that influence is absent. Every attempt to dominate the sensory landscape betrays the insecurity within. The most profound irony is that noise often isolates its own maker. The louder one becomes, the less approachable one is perceived. People are drawn to presence, not performance, to calm, not chaos, to mystery, not demand. Excessive noise fractures attention instead of focusing it, dissipates energy instead of channeling it, and invites fatigue rather than admiration. The desperate mind mistakes visibility for mastery, yet visibility without subtlety destroys magnetism. Those who cannot sit in quiet, who cannot command without announcing, lose the very influence they attempt to fabricate. Desperation also transforms attention into a form of obsession, but not the kind that empowers. Others observe not because they revere, but because they calculate. They measure the instability beneath the display, the yearning behind the shout, and the fragility hidden in the spectacle. Noise is an open book for those who know how to read between the lines. Emotional intensity broadcast without strategy becomes an invitation to exploitation, a doorway through which influence can be hijacked. The desperate reveal too much while thinking they reveal control. They confuse consumption with respect. Consider the modern landscape of attention. Social media, endless posting, ceaseless commentary. Visibility is lauded as power. Followers, likes, views, they are taken as proof of worth. Yet the psychology of desire is not satisfied by quantity of notice, but by quality of presence. The loudest is often the least influential. The constantly visible is often the least compelling. Desperation masquerades as engagement and noise as dominance, but those who truly command require neither amplification nor repetition. Their authority is gravitational, not demonstrative. Even in private spaces, in subtle interactions, the principle holds. The person who fills every silence, who insists on constant verbal participation, who cannot tolerate observation without response, is signaling lack. Silence terrifies them because it exposes the internal emptiness they attempt to mask. By contrast, the individual who speaks only when necessary, who measures responses, who uses quiet as a tool, demonstrates control, power, and presence. Attention becomes currency only when it is earned. Desperation buys nothing but temporary awareness. To harness influence, noise is the language of those who have lost internal authority, of those who must borrow respect from the perceptions of others. True power thrives in the absence of spectacle. It does not scream, it does not beg, it waits, silent, immovable, inevitable. Desperation is loud, mastery is quiet. In conclusion, noise, attention, and desperation form a trinity of self-exposure that erodes influence. Loudness signals insecurity, visibility substitutes for value, and the constant need to be seen masks the absence of real authority. Those who understand this principle wield silence, restraint, and measured presence as weapons. They create gravity without noise, command respect without demonstration, and maintain control without the crutch of validation. The louder they do not need to shout, the stronger they become. The quieter they remain, the more the world leans in. Desperation is transparent. Power is enigmatic. Attention when sought in noise is fleeting. Attention earned through quiet mastery endures. Silence is the canvas, restraint the brush, and the absence of desperation the signature of power. To dominate without appearing to dominate, to influence without exposing need, is the final art. Those who fail to see the cost of noise, those who confuse visibility with value, will never understand that influence is earned in the spaces where sound dies, and the mind leans in, helpless, drawn by gravity unseen. Chapter 10. The Observer, the one who watches silently, commands the stage. There is a power that does not speak, does not gesture, does not insist upon recognition. It is the power of the observer. While others perform, react, and assert, the watcher remains unmoved, absorbing every movement, every word, every hesitation. To observe is to dominate without contact, to control without interference, to know without exposure. To know without exposure. The observer is invisible yet inescapable, present yet untouchable, and in that paradox lies the essence of authority. Humans are participants in the world, conditioned to act, to express, to compete for notice. They crave affirmation, validation, and understanding. They seek to occupy space, to make noise, to impose their presence. Yet every action, every display, every desperate bid for attention is monitored, cataloged, and measured by the silent watcher. The observer does not need to participate, because in the act of observation alone, they accumulate power. Knowledge becomes leverage. Understanding becomes influence. Patience becomes a weapon. The observer's advantage lies in delay. Immediate reactions are for the unmastered. Those who respond to quickly expose desire, reveal weakness, or betray impatience. The watcher knows the rhythm of silence, the cadence of delay, the subtle influence of a withheld response. In postponing reaction, the observer forces others into uncertainty, compels them to reveal intentions, and amplifies their own psychological gravity. Power is not in participation. It is in the ability to remain detached, to measure, to understand, and to act only when it serves strategy. Consider the psychological impact on those who are watched. No one enjoys being invisible, yet no one resents being acknowledged if it is measured. The observer creates tension without intervention, curiosity without intrusion, and desire without inducement. Those under observation begin to act differently. They overthink, they overperform, they reveal what would otherwise remain hidden. The observer does not need to manipulate through words or gestures. The act of observation itself becomes a subtle seduction of the mind. People disclose themselves without consent, not because of coercion, but because the watcher remains unmoved. Silence becomes a mirror, reflecting not the observer, but the vulnerabilities of those who cannot escape their gaze. The observer understands the illusions of control that participants cling to. They recognize the desperate bid for significance in every gesture, the hidden anxieties behind every declaration, the insecurities that lurk beneath the performance. Each movement, each verbal tick, each moment of overcompensation is cataloged, stored, and leveraged. The observer does not impose, they extract. Influence is accrued without action, because knowledge itself is power. One of the most potent tools of the observer is anonymity. By concealing presence, by masking reaction, by refusing the temptation to intervene, the watcher transforms into a silent authority. Others may attempt to fill the void with explanation, argument, or display, yet each act of noise only confirms the observer's dominance. The observer understands that those who cannot measure the response of the watcher are trapped in a psychological game they cannot control. Their every decision, their every impulse, their every attempt to assert mastery becomes material for the silent strategist. Observation also allows a mastery of context. While participants are consumed by the immediacy of action, the watcher sees patterns. They notice repetition, contradictions, and weaknesses invisible to those caught in the momentum of participation. They recognize alliances forming, rivalries brewing, and intentions unspoken. The observer turns time into an ally, patience into a weapon, and the world into a map of influence, plotted not with force but with insight. The observer's restraint is not passivity. It is disciplined calculation. Every moment of silence, every withheld comment, every measured pause is intentional. Power is cultivated through what is not done, not merely through what is done. To speak, to react, to intervene, these are tools for the unmastered. The true observer operates outside the need for recognition. They allow events to unfold, watch reactions in real time, and intervene only when their hand will have irreversible impact. Consider the psychology of delayed response. Immediate action signals desire, attachment, or bias. It communicates need. It exposes vulnerability. It alerts others to the boundaries of influence. The observer waits. They allow the environment, the participants, and the circumstances to reveal themselves first. In this delay, tension accumulates, mistakes multiply, and the field becomes fertile for strategic influence. Patience is not weakness. It is the architecture of control. Every second of quiet strengthens presence. Every unspoken judgment amplifies authority. Observation also cultivates emotional immunity. By remaining detached, the watcher does not succumb to provocation, offense, or manipulation. They are immune to the drama of participants, unshaken by the chaos of the environment, and unaffected by the need for immediate gratification. In this emotional solitude lies strength. They become a psychological island, a presence unassailable by the storms of others' desires, insecurities, or impulses. Those who wish to influence or unsettle the observer find themselves battling shadows. Yet, the greatest mastery of the observer is subtle intervention. Knowledge without self-disclosure is not inert. Once the patterns are mapped, once vulnerabilities are exposed, once the field is measured, the observer can act with precision. Their influence is surgical, invisible, and absolute. Words, gestures, and actions are used sparingly, with exacting intent. Each intervention reshapes perception, nudges behavior, and consolidates control. The observer's impact is magnified because it is unexpected, deliberate, and informed. To be the observer is to embrace paradox. Present yet invisible, aware yet detached, powerful without proclamation. It requires endurance, patience, and the willingness to sit in the discomfort of watching without acting. The observer does not seek applause, affirmation, or recognition. They are beyond the need for external validation. Their power is measured not by how much they are noticed, but by how much influence they accrue silently. In the end, the observer's domain is the mind of others. By watching without revealing, by measuring without disclosing, by waiting without reacting, the watcher commands more than those who shout, act, or assert. They understand that influence is not a function of visibility, but of perception, that authority is cultivated in silence, and that power grows in the space between action and reaction. The observer is the quiet eye of the storm, unmoved, unseen, and all-seeing. The lesson is clear. Those who chase, perform, and seek constant recognition are easily ensnared. Those who watch, wait, and understand are untouchable. Noise may demand attention, action may provoke notice, but the observer earns the ultimate currency, control. They see what others cannot, know what others hide, and influence without effort. In the theater of human interaction, the silent watcher is the true master. Silence is their tool, stillness is their weapon, detachment is their armor. And in every measured glance, every delayed response, every act of knowing without revealing, the observer wields power that is invisible, undeniable, and eternal. Chapter 11. The Unavailable Mind. Desire is born in absence, and obsession thrives where access is denied. There is a subtle cruelty in unavailability. Not the cruelty of anger, not the cruelty of insult, but the quiet, invisible cruelty of absence. Humans are drawn to what they cannot. They hunger for what is just beyond reach. They chase illusions, misread intentions, and project meaning into gaps that were never filled. And it is in this space, the space created by deliberate distance, that true psychological gravity is formed. The unavailable mind does not bend, does not yield, and does not perform. It exists as a presence defined, not by what it gives, but by what it withholds. Emotional distance is misunderstood by the uninitiated. They mistake withdrawal for rejection, silence for indifference, and scarcity for neglect. But the unavailable mind operates with precision. Every absence, every pause, every delay is a carefully calibrated act. It is a strategy, not a mistake. It is a design that converts longing into power, desire into devotion, and curiosity into obsession. Those who are too eager, too present, too easily reached are predictable. They are exhausted by their own accessibility. The unavailable mind, by contrast, exists as a puzzle, an enigma, a force that resists definition and tempts fascination. Scarcity is the architect of desire. In a world of instant gratification, where information, attention, and affection are endlessly accessible, the mind craves what is rare. The unavailable mind leverages this scarcity with effortless mastery. A delayed message, a measured glance, a withheld compliment. Each absence becomes a tool. Each moment of inaccessibility amplifies the perceived value of presence. Humans are conditioned to chase, to pursue, and to compete for attention. And the unavailable mind turns this instinct into its domain, guiding the hunt, controlling the pace, and dictating the terms of engagement without uttering a single word. The psychology of longing is delicate yet potent. Desire is not created through force or argument. It is cultivated through tension and uncertainty. When access is denied, the mind begins to fill the void with speculation. It projects fantasies, assigns meaning, and elevates the minimal into the monumental. Every small interaction becomes a signal, every minor gesture a declaration. The unavailable mind does not speak excessively, does not explain, does not perform, yet it dominates perception. Others interpret actions through the lens of what is missing, and in doing so, the observer becomes ensnared by their own imagination. This is the subtle power of the unreachable. Humans equate availability with submission, and submission with safety. To deny safety, to withhold submission, is to assert a different kind of authority. The unavailable mind does not compete, does not argue, and does not demand validation. It simply exists in measured absence, compelling others to act according to the rhythms it dictates. Those who cannot reach it overextend, overcommit, and ultimately surrender their agency without ever realizing it. Desire becomes a lever, and scarcity becomes the fulcrum. Yet the unavailable mind is not cruel by chance, it is disciplined. It requires control over impulse, mastery of timing, and a tolerance for discomfort. To be consistently inaccessible is to resist the temptation of immediate gratification. It is to withhold the ego's need for attention and to embrace the psychological tension of others. Those who lack this discipline mistake unavailability for weakness, failing to grasp that power often resides in what is absent, not what is present. The mastery of distance is a quiet art, one that ensures others reveal themselves while the unavailable mind remains untouched. Consider the emotional mechanics at play. Humans seek patterns, explanations, and closure. When these are denied, the brain enters a state of heightened attention. Curiosity becomes fixation. Minor inconsistencies become puzzles. The unavailable mind exploits this cognitive drive, creating an environment where perception is manipulated without overt interference. Absence is not emptiness. It is a canvas upon which desire paints its own obsession. The mind of the observer is never neutral. Every delay, every withheld emotion, every carefully measured distance shapes the thoughts and feelings of those who pursue it. The effect of scarcity is magnified by restraint. Availability, when offered too freely, diminishes value. Overexposure breeds familiarity. Familiarity erodes fascination, and fascination without tension decays into indifference. The unavailable mind understands this intuitively. It calibrates presence to sustain interest, using silence, timing, and emotional restraint as instruments of influence. Each appearance is significant, each interaction is meaningful, and each withdrawal reinforces the perception of rarity. Desire is not created in abundance, it is forged in the forge of denial. Distance also cultivates self-reflection in the observer. When someone is unobtainable, those who seek them must project their own needs, fantasies, and fears onto the target. The unavailable mind becomes a mirror, reflecting not reality, but the psychological architecture of desire. This reflection is intoxicating. Others begin to construct narratives, reinterpret intentions, and escalate emotional investment without the unavailable mind ever needing to intervene. Power is accrued silently, invisibly, and without confrontation. The unavailable mind does not act from malice. It does not manipulate for the sake of cruelty. Its power is rooted in comprehension, discipline, and the understanding of human psychology. By controlling access, it shapes perception, elicits devotion, and commands attention. It leverages the predictable hunger for connection, the unavoidable desire for understanding, and the compulsive need for engagement. It does not force, it does not argue, it does not perform. It simply exists, measured, controlled, and untouchable. Finally, the ultimate lesson of the unavailable mind is the paradox of desire. What is denied is coveted, what is distant is admired, and what is withheld is sought. In a world where immediacy dominates, where access is constant, and where attention is cheap, unavailability is a rare and dangerous power. The mind that embraces absence does not merely influence, it ensnares. It does not simply attract, it mesmerizes. And in the silent spaces it creates, obsession grows, longing intensifies, and psychological dominance becomes absolute. The unavailable mind is a lesson in restraint, an exercise in patience, and a masterclass in control. It reminds us that desire is not earned through force, that attention is not bought through words, and that influence is not measured by proximity. To be unattainable is to wield power invisible yet undeniable. In every measured absence, every intentional delay, every silent refusal to satisfy curiosity, the mind shapes the world around it. Those who chase, clamor, and demand attention are bound by their own impulses. Those who remain unavailable watch, wait, and command from the shadows. In the theater of human longing, scarcity is the playwright, distance is the stage, and the unavailable mind is the director. The unseen hand guides desire, shapes behavior, and orchestrates obsession. And the one who understands this principle, who masters the art of deliberate absence, becomes untouchable, irresistible, and unassailable. Silence, distance, restraint. These are the instruments of influence, and in their careful deployment, the unavailable mind becomes an enigma that is feared, revered, and endlessly desired. Chapter 12. Calm as superiority. Reacting first is the beginning of surrender. True mastery lives in measured stillness. There is a subtle tyranny in calmness. It is not the calm born of ignorance, nor the superficial peace of indifference. This is the calm that carries weight, the quiet that commands attention, the stillness that bends perception. It is superiority expressed without declaration, dominance revealed without force. To remain unmoved while chaos swirls around is to hold a position of invisible authority. The world flinches at reaction. The mind bows to restraint. The first to act is the first to lose, and those who learn to master stillness wield a power that is both terrifying and magnetic. Emotional regulation is not a virtue, it is a weapon. It is the silent hand that turns volatility into advantage. To allow anger, fear, or desperation to dictate motion is to relinquish control. To speak, to act, or to react impulsively is to surrender the narrative to others. The mind that remains poised under pressure operates on a plane where others cannot follow. It does not compete in volume, velocity, or intensity. It governs the rhythm of engagement. Every delay, every pause, every moment of deliberate composure is an assertion of dominance. Those who are first to speak, first to act, first to react, are already under the sway of another's design. Calmness, in contrast, is sovereignty cloaked in silence. Pressure is a crucible. It strips away pretenses, exposes weaknesses, and reveals the architecture of character. The uninitiated flail under tension, responding with noise, haste, or visible agitation. The superior remains silent. They observe the storm without flinching, allowing the turbulence to expose the vulnerabilities of others. Their composure is a mirror, their stillness a trap. In a room of panic, hesitation, or uncertainty, the calm figure becomes the axis around which chaos spins. The reactions of others betray desires, fears, and secrets the calm mind harvests silently. The human brain craves information to process uncertainty. When confronted with calmness in the face of provocation, the mind attempts to fill the void. It projects intent, predicts outcomes, and scrutinizes behavior. Every twitch, every microexpression, every deliberate pause becomes a cipher. The calm mind requires nothing from others, yet extracts everything. Others overcommit, over-explain, overreact, and in doing so, they reveal their limitations. The still observer, untouched by the swirl of emotion, moves with an invisible momentum, collecting influence without uttering a word. Dominance through calmness is subtle yet absolute. It is not the dominance of shouting, intimidation, or aggression. It is the dominance of perception. Those who act first are visible. Those who react are predictable. But the composed individual operates in shadows. Their intentions are unreadable, their reactions measured, and their presence inescapable. Calmness is an asymmetrical advantage. In a world addicted to immediacy, it is a signal that the mind is in control, that the ego is tethered, and that the self is sovereign. Others may speak louder, move faster, or act with more drama, but the still figure holds the ultimate leverage. The first to react is always at a disadvantage because reaction is acknowledgement. To respond is to concede space, to validate the stimulus, to engage on the terms dictated by another. In contrast, measured stillness redirects the narrative. It denies validation, resists provocation, and transforms the expectations of engagement. Those who demand a response find none. Those who anticipate volatility are met with an unshakable calm. In every delay, every pause, every controlled breath, authority is reinforced. The first mover is ensnared by the logic of immediacy. The still mind reigns in the domain of patience. Stillness under pressure is not mere absence of motion. It is an active strategy. It signals stability, confidence, and dominance without uttering a single word. It allows observation to become extraction. Every ripple in the emotional atmosphere is noted, categorized, and leveraged. Every moment of agitation in others becomes an advantage. The calm mind is both anchor and predator. It holds ground while drawing prey into patterns of predictability. Emotional mastery is not benevolent, it is cold, calculating and irresistibly magnetic. Those who encounter it feel both awe and unease. The power of calmness extends beyond individual interactions. It shapes perception across environments. Rooms bend to composure. Groups orient towards stillness. Leaders are defined not by volume, but by the gravitational pull of measured presence. When one moves, speaks, or reacts too quickly, they surrender control. When one remains unmoved, their influence grows exponentially. Calmness is not passivity. It is the architecture of authority. The mind that cultivates it dictates the tempo of life around it, subtly aligning others' actions with its rhythm. There is an ethical ambiguity inherent in this mastery. Calmness can be nurturing, stabilizing, and protective, but in the hands of the calculated, it is a form of psychological leverage. It transforms expectation into tension, tension into desire, and desire into compliance. The observer learns to harness discomfort, to cultivate anticipation, and to extract devotion without overt instruction. In every pause, every unspoken word, the calm mind exerts influence that is invisible yet undeniable. Composure is the antidote to chaos. In a culture addicted to reaction, impulsivity, and overexpression, the calm figure is a silent anomaly. They challenge assumptions, disrupt patterns, and unsettle those who rely on visibility for validation. By remaining unshaken, they create scarcity in attention, rarity in behavior, and value in perception. Others speak, act, and expose themselves, yet the composed observer remains untouchable. Every movement of others becomes predictable, every expression exploitable, and every emotional outburst a source of leverage. To cultivate this superiority is to embrace paradox. Stillness is strength disguised as passivity. Silence is authority disguised as detachment. Patience is dominance disguised as humility. And mastery is revealed not in action, but in restraint. Those who understand this principle operate with a subtle yet inexorable power. They do not command through words, they dominate through presence. They do not force obedience. They cultivate devotion through measured absence and emotional control. The final lesson of calm superiority is simple yet profound. The mind that reacts first is enslaved by circumstance, while the mind that remains still is free to dictate the circumstances. Emotional restraint is not denial, it is mastery. Silence is not weakness, it is influence. Presence is not volume, it is gravity. In the measured control of self lies the control of others. The world may roar, tremble, and convulse, but the calm mind remains sovereign. It observes, it waits, it bends reality around its rhythm. To be calm is to be superior. To remain composed under pressure is to command without words. To withhold reaction is to win before the battle begins. And in every room, every encounter, every fleeting moment, the still mind collects power quietly, invisibly, inevitably. Chapter 13. The Seduction of the Void. Desire is never for what is present. It lives in the gaps, the unanswered, the unseen. The mind craves fullness, yet it is in emptiness that it becomes obsessed. The void is not absence. It is potential, projection, and temptation. It is the space where imagination thrives, where desire stretches beyond reality, and where control is exercised without a single word. People do not fall in love with what they can grasp. They fall in love with what they cannot define. And those who understand this principle wield an influence that is invisible, intoxicating, and absolute. Absence is the first instrument of seduction. It is not a withdrawal born of fear or neglect. It is deliberate, calculated, and precise. By stepping back, by withholding presence, by refusing immediate access, one creates a space that the mind cannot ignore. The human brain, conditioned to fill gaps, projects meaning onto emptiness. Every silence becomes a riddle, every delay a signal, every missing piece a mirror for desire. The void does not scream for attention. It commands it. It draws obsession, speculation, and longing as surely as gravity draws bodies. Consider the psychology of projection. When confronted with a figure who remains just out of reach, the observer begins to populate absence with narratives, fantasies, and ideals. What is unseen becomes more desirable than what is known. Details are imagined, intentions are mythologized, and the mind invents perfection in what is incomplete. Desire is no longer tethered to reality. It floats in the space between presence and imagination. The person in the void becomes a canvas, and every emotion, fear, or longing of the observer is painted onto it. The seducer need not act, speak, or explain. They need only exist as the silent container for another's projections. This is why people fall in love with ideas rather than individuals. The human heart does not attach to reality. It attaches to possibility. It is the unknown, the ambiguous, the unreachable that captivates. Physical presence, words, and gestures can satisfy only temporarily. They cannot sustain obsession. Only the void can. By creating a gap, a subtle distance, the mind becomes ensnared in unanswered questions. Who is this person? What do they want? Why do they remain silent? The questions are infinite, and the mind cannot rest until it seeks resolution. Yet resolution is never granted. Desire, in this sense, is engineered. The void is a trap, invisible and irresistible. Silence and absence are not passive. They are active forces that manipulate perception. Each moment of withdrawal is a brushstroke in the architecture of influence. The observer begins to internalize longing as proof of value. The more they desire, the more powerful the absence becomes. Emotional hunger is amplified by mystery, and the void transforms curiosity into obsession. Every glance at emptiness becomes a meditation on what might be. Every imagined interaction becomes more vivid than any reality could offer. The seducer, present yet absent, becomes a gravitational center around which the mind revolves, powerless yet enthralled. The void thrives on unanswered questions. Humans are pattern-seeking creatures. Our brains recoil at uncertainty and fill gaps with narratives, often elevating the unknown far above the known. The one who disappears strategically, who leaves traces without closure, who creates expectation without satisfaction, controls the psychological landscape. The mind, starved of certainty, becomes addicted to speculation. Every imagined motive, every assumed emotion, every silent gesture is interpreted, analyzed, and exaggerated. Obsession is no longer optional. It is inevitable. There is a danger in misunderstanding the void. It is not emptiness in the mundane sense. It is not neglect, avoidance, or indifference born of weakness. It is absence wielded as power. To vanish without method is to lose influence. To create space with precision is to ensnare attention. The difference between the ineffective and the irresistible lies in subtlety, timing, rhythm, and awareness of emotional tension. Every gap is intentional, every silence a psychological lever. The void is a game where the rules are invisible, yet the consequences are absolute. Desire in the void is compounded by frustration. The human psyche finds beauty in pursuit, obsession in uncertainty, and meaning in the unattainable. When confronted with clarity, the mind relaxes. When faced with definiteness, the imagination recedes. The void, however, amplifies longing. Absence creates an illusion of control. The observer believes their thoughts, fantasies, and speculations are autonomous, yet they are drawn inexorably into the gravitational pull of the one who remains absent. Emotional investment grows without reciprocation, and obsession takes root in fertile emptiness. Control through absence is subtle yet profound. It is not coercion or threat. It is the orchestration of perception. The The seducer manipulates attention, expectation, and imagination. Every delay is timed to maximize curiosity. Every disappearance is calibrated to intensify longing. The mind in the void is trapped, not by force, but by fascination. The observer becomes the agent of their own entrapment, projecting desire, fear, and hope onto the canvas provided. Authority is exercised without speech. Influence is exerted without interaction. The void is the ultimate tool of psychological enslavement, invisible yet all-consuming. Even familiarity, when handled poorly, can be destructive. Presence must be measured. Too much accessibility dissolves the potency of absence. The balance between engagement and withdrawal is delicate but decisive. A touch, a word, or a glance is more powerful when framed by the anticipation generated in the void. The human mind craves patterns, yet it is the interruption of patterns, the deliberate gaps, that intensifies desire. Predictability kills fascination. Mystery preserves it. The seducer does not act constantly. They orchestrate absence, knowing that the unseen is more potent than the visible. The void is also a reflection of inner mastery. Those who can wield absence with precision have disciplined themselves in restraint, timing, and observation. They understand the psychology of longing, the neurology of attention, and the architecture of desire. They are not ruled by impulses. They rule the impulses of others. They recognize that power is rarely declared. It is implied, insinuated, and sustained. In silence, in withdrawal, and absence, they build an empire of influence invisible to those who chase the obvious. And yet, the void is not cruelty. It is strategy. It is the art of shaping minds without coercion. It is the discipline of remaining untouchable while drawing others toward imagined connection. Every unanswered question, every projected desire, every unfulfilled expectation consolidates power. The observer becomes captive, not by chains, but by imagination. Desire itself becomes the cage, and the architect of absence is its master. The final lesson of the void is terrifying in its simplicity. Humans do not desire what they can hold. They desire what they cannot. Presence, clarity, and certainty satisfy only temporarily. Absence fuels obsession indefinitely. To wield the void is to command attention without visibility, to inspire longing without interaction, and to control minds without confrontation. It is the silent language of power, the invisible architecture of influence, and the subtle mastery of human desire. Those who understand it can disappear at will and still remain the center of every thought, every fantasy, every unspoken question. The seduction of the void is not gentle. It is relentless, invisible, and unavoidable. Desire thrives in emptiness. Obsession blooms in unanswered questions, and power consolidates in absence. Silence is not empty. It is dominion. The mind that inhabits the void controls the minds that reach for it. And in that space between presence and absence, the seducer reigns supreme. Chapter 14. Silence and Desire. The longer you wait, the deeper the obsession grows. Silence is not mere absence of sound. It is a living, breathing force that twists the mind, reshapes perception, and molds desire. It is the shadow that lingers after a word is spoken, the pause that drags time into obsession, and the unseen hand that pulls attention toward its source. The human brain, wired to seek answers, craves resolution, but when it is denied, tension builds, fascination deepens, and longing becomes addiction. Delayed response is one of the most subtle tools of influence. Every moment of withholding, every measured pause before a word, an action, or a glance is a lever that shifts emotional gravity. The mind, starved for certainty, begins to fill the void with thought, speculation, and imagination. What could the delay mean? Why has there been no response? Each unanswered question transforms into 1,000 imagined scenarios, each more consuming than the last. In this suspended space, the observer loses control, and desire begins to define itself not by reality, but by expectation. Waiting is a slow-burning drug. The human psyche does not simply tolerate delays, it amplifies them. Uncertainty becomes intoxicating, frustration transforms into pleasure, and the mind begins to crave the very tension it once resisted. There is a subtle thrill in not knowing, a quiet satisfaction in imagining, a forbidden excitement in projecting fantasies onto the unseen. The one who understands this principle does not need to perform constantly. They let silence do the work. Every moment of an action becomes a seed, growing into obsession, anchoring attention and enslaving the imagination. The pleasure of unresolved anticipation is not a weakness, it is power. To create desire, one does not need presence or performance. One needs absence and subtlety. The longer a response is delayed, the more valuable it becomes, not for its content, but for its existence. Each pause, each hesitation, is a lesson in restraint, teaching the observer that longing is not just a feeling, it is a dependency. Emotional addiction is born in these moments where uncertainty dominates thought and imagination thrives on lack. The silent provocateur is aware of this, wielding absence as a weapon more potent than any word or gesture. Consider the psychology behind it. Humans are pattern seekers craving rhythm and predictability. When those patterns are interrupted, the mind rebels. It searches for explanations, invents meaning, and invests emotionally in the outcome. Silence, when used deliberately, becomes a mirror for projection. Observers do not merely wait, they anticipate, analyze, and imagine scenarios. Every pause becomes a canvas on which desire is painted. Every delay a stage on which obsession performs. The silent figure does not chase. They orchestrate the pursuit. Desire becomes self-sustaining, fueled not by interaction, but by absence. There is an art to this manipulation. Timing, subtlety, and perception must be calibrated precisely. Too long a pause, and the observer may abandon the chase. Too short, and the tension dissipates. The ideal delay is never arbitrary. It is a rhythm, a dance between expectation and denial, a careful orchestration that transforms waiting into emotional leverage. The mind caught in this web begins to reinterpret its own feelings, confusing longing with admiration, curiosity with attachment, and frustration with desire. The silent provocateur does not simply withhold, they conduct, direct, and sculpt attention. Pleasure in unresolved anticipation is paradoxical. The observer experiences both satisfaction and yearning, desire and frustration, hope and fear simultaneously. The human brain, incapable of tolerating such contradictions comfortably, becomes addicted to the emotional tension itself. Each unanswered message, each delayed glance, each silence is no longer just absence, it becomes a drug, potent and irresistible. Emotional craving grows not from interaction, but from the suspension of it. The longer the anticipation, the deeper the psychological imprint, and the more control the silent figure exerts. This is why those who speak first often lose. Immediate explanation, constant availability, and hasty response dissolve tension and extinguish desire. Overexposure makes the observer familiar, predictable, and ultimately indifferent. Silence, restraint, and delayed engagement, by contrast, creates scarcity and value. The observer begins to chase not the person, but the emotion the person represents. The wait itself becomes the seduction, the tension a proof of importance, and the unresolved anticipation a psychological anchor. Every pause is an echo of power, every absence a declaration of dominance. Yet silence must be purposeful. It is not neglect, avoidance, or fear. It is strategy. The one who wields it understands that humans are not drawn to emptiness per se, but to the mystery it conceals. By creating the perception of selective attention, the silent provocateur shapes emotional reality. Desire is no longer spontaneous. It is guided, nurtured, and intensified by absence. The observer invests emotionally in what they cannot control, becoming entangled in the architecture of longing without realizing it. In this way, silence becomes a medium of influence, an invisible force that dictates the rhythm of thought, feeling, and expectation. There is a subtle cruelty in this method, yet it is not malicious. It is mastery. The observer does not realize that obsession is engineered, that their emotional highs and lows are orchestrated, or that the tension they crave is cultivated. Desire, frustration, hope, and imagination all converge in the space created by silence, and the silent figure remains untouched, omnipresent in absence, commanding attention without a word. The mind addicted to uncertainty is bound by invisible chains, yet believes itself free. This is the ultimate power of delayed response. It transforms desire into dependency, anticipation into worship, and waiting into a form of silent devotion. Silence and desire are inseparable, each feeding the other in a feedback loop of obsession. The observer cannot disengage because they do not merely want an answer. They crave the process itself, the unresolved tension, the pleasurable uncertainty. Every pause, every delay, every withheld gesture is a lesson in psychological domination. The silent provocateur does not compete with reality. They redefine it. shaping perception through absence, anticipation, and the intoxicating pleasure of unresolved questions. Finally, one must understand the seductive danger of silence. It is not absence that ensnares, but the mind's need to fill it. Those who can remain untouchable while evoking relentless desire hold a power that is absolute. They teach others that longing itself is addictive, that anticipation can be pleasure, and that unresolved tension is more compelling than fulfillment. The observer is no longer a participant. They are a captive of their own imagination. Silence in this dark alchemy becomes the ultimate instrument of control, the most refined language of influence, and the invisible hand that shapes desire without effort or exposure. The art of delayed response is simple, yet devastatingly effective. Do not rush. Do not explain. Do not satisfy too soon. Let tension accumulate. Let longing grow. Let desire feed on absence. The mind, desperate for closure, will fill the void with obsession, transforming anticipation into emotional addiction. In the realm of silence, the one who waits, measures, and withdraws is never powerless. They are the master of hearts, the orchestrator of desire, and the quiet architect of psychological gravity. Chapter 15. Myth, Projection, and Worship. The quietest presence can become the loudest legend. Silence is never empty. It is a vessel, an invisible canvas upon which the mind paints its deepest fears, desires, and fantasies. When words fade and gestures become measured, the observer begins to project. Every pause, every glance, every absence becomes more than reality. It becomes symbol, idea, myth. Humans crave meaning, and when confronted with the unknown, the mind fills the void, elevating the silent figure into a god of perception, a monument of imagination. It begins subtly. A look withheld too long, a response delayed, a presence that is sensed but never consumed. These small acts create openings in perception, spaces where projection thrives. The observer's imagination does not perceive a person, they perceive an idea. The silent figure is no longer merely human. They are legend in motion. Every action, no matter how mundane, is amplified through the lens of anticipation and desire. What they are becomes irrelevant. What they represent becomes everything. The power of myth lies not in visibility, but in restraint. The more one is absent, enigmatic, and carefully measured, the more the mind of others elevates them. Humans are storytellers at heart. They need heroes, icons, and symbols. When someone refuses to conform to expectation, they force the brain to invent narratives, assign meanings, and construct significance. Silence transforms into significance. Withdrawal becomes authority. Invisibility becomes a canvas for obsession. The silent figure is not merely watched. They are worshipped, not for what they do, but for what they allow the mind to create. Projection is the mechanism of worship. When an individual refuses explanation, avoids overexposure, or simply exists without insistence, others begin to fill the gaps. Desires, fears, ideals, they are all projected onto the silent figure. The observer is no longer in control of perception, the perceiver is. And yet, paradoxically, the silent figure retains ultimate power. They become a mirror in which others see what they most wish to see, their own fantasies and fears made tangible, yet unattainable. This is the alchemy of restraint. The absence of definition creates a mythology stronger than any narrative could achieve. Humans have an insatiable need for meaning. Ambiguity is a threat and an invitation simultaneously. The unknown provokes anxiety and curiosity, fascination and fear. When silence becomes methodical, when restraint is intentional, the observer is drawn into a labyrinth of imagination. They are compelled to seek patterns, assign motives, and build stories. The quiet figure, by doing nothing more than existing on the edges of attention, becomes central to thought, heart, and desire. Every imagined story reinforces the legend. Every projection feeds the power. Every worshipful thought strengthens influence. Consider how legends are born in history and psyche alike. A warrior who disappears into shadow, a ruler who rarely speaks, a lover who is seen in glimpses, all become larger than life. Their humanity diminishes, replaced by the weight of idea and symbol. Every absence is a stroke of myth-making. The observer's brain writes chapters that reality never delivers. They create significance where there was neutrality. They worship because the mind cannot resist filling the unknown with meaning. The silent figure does not command. They invite, they allow, they cultivate the elevation of the mundane into the divine. The creation of legend is inseparable from restraint. Excess diminishes awe. Words, explanations, overexposure. These are the poisons that flatten perception. To become myth, one must move deliberately, act sparingly, and speak rarely. The silent figure understands that significance is not built through activity, but through anticipation. Every measured pause, every subtle gesture, every layer of absence is a brushstroke in a portrait crafted by others' minds. Desire and obsession are not manufactured. They are channeled through the psychology of projection, amplified by restraint, and magnified by mystery. Worship, then, is not a gift freely given. It is a response to carefully calibrated absence. Humans are addicted to meaning, and the silent figure becomes the ultimate addiction. To be watched is not enough. To be understood is insufficient. One must be unknowable, elusive. The observer invests energy, emotion, and thought, not in the figure themselves, but in the idea they evoke. This is the quiet mastery of influence, to shape perception without acting, to command devotion without speaking. Yet there is danger in myth. Legends are fragile. They exist only in perception, and perception is volatile. The silent figure must remain consistent in restraint, measured in action, and deliberate in absence. Any lapse, excessive explanation, overexposure, emotional indulgence can shatter the construct. The legend is sustained not by charisma alone, but by an unyielding control of presence and perception. The silent figure is always aware. To exist in myth is to balance on the edge of obsession and reality, to nurture projection without revealing too much, to allow worship without submission. The ultimate paradox is that humans worship what they do not understand. The silent figure, by withholding, by retreating, and by existing beyond explanation, becomes larger than life. They are loved, feared, desired, and admired not for their actions, but for the space they leave open. Every absence is a testament, every silence a sermon. Myth, projection, and worship are not the consequence of words. They are the reward of restraint, the fruit of intentional invisibility, and the harvest of psychological gravity. In the end, those who master silence and projection transcend mere interaction. They do not chase attention. They cultivate obsession. They do not seek admiration. They become the mirror into which others see their own ideals. They do not crave loyalty. They engineer devotion. Myth is not built on reality. It is built on absence, longing, and the imagination of those who cannot resist filling the void. Worship emerges naturally, obsession inevitable, and influence absolute. The silent figure is not human. They are archetype. They are idea. They are legend in motion. The dark art of becoming myth is subtle, seductive, and devastatingly effective. It requires patience, understanding of human psychology, and mastery of absence. To the uninitiated, it appears accidental, almost magical. To those who understand it, it is precise, deliberate, and absolute. Silence is no longer silence. It is the hand that shapes desire. Absence is no longer emptiness. It is the stage upon which projection becomes devotion. And the silent figure? They are no longer merely seen. They are revered, worshipped, and forever inscribed in the imagination of others. Chapter 16. Cold control versus inner emptiness. Absolute control can consume the soul it once ruled. Power is seductive because it promises control, mastery, and influence over the world around you. But there is a dangerous mirror in which power reflects itself, a silent truth often ignored. The closer you get to total control, the thinner the line becomes between mastery and emptiness. The silent authority that commands attention, manipulates desire, and shapes perception is a fragile construct. One misstep, one overreach, and the cold discipline that enthralls others can become the very prison that erodes your own spirit. Control begins with absence. The fewer the explanations, the fewer the movements, the greater the impact of each word, each gesture, each silence. People are drawn to what they cannot predict, what they cannot fully comprehend. Stillness, quietness, and measured detachment create a gravitational pull, a psychological force that bends the will of others without overt pressure. This is the seductive art of power. Influence without necessity, dominance without display, control without declaration. But silence is not neutrality. Silence is weight. Silence is responsibility. And the weight of endless observation, of carefully managed absence, can grow into a hollow emptiness within. Those who master detachment may find themselves addicted to it, not as a tool, but as a barrier. Mystery becomes isolation. Strategic absence transforms into emotional exile. and the very tactics that enthrall others begin to estrange the self. The observer becomes trapped, craving the attention that their absence creates, addicted to the myth they cultivate, and yet unable to satisfy the hunger they have ignited. The fine line between power and hollowness is measured in perception. Others see mastery, self-possession, and composure. The practitioner of silence exudes confidence and authority, yet internally, there is a gnawing void. Every withheld response, every delayed gesture, every calculated disappearance is a double-edged sword. It entices, enthralls, and mesmerizes, but it also removes the opportunity for genuine human connection. The more you control, the more you are alone. The more you withhold, the more you risk becoming hollow. Mystery is intoxicating, but detachment is lonely. Humans are drawn to enigma, yes, but they are also drawn to warmth, to empathy, to glimpses of shared vulnerability. A figure who is eternally cold, eternally silent, may command attention, yet they invite no loyalty, no trust, no intimacy. The paradox of control is that the more perfect the illusion of mastery, the more fragile the inner self becomes. Authority maintained through absence is seductive. Authority maintained through detachment alone is a trap. One can bend the will of others, but cannot bend one's own need for connection without cost. Observe the collapse of silent authority. It rarely occurs with violence or overt confrontation. It happens subtly, a glance too revealing, a moment of impatience, a miscalculated disclosure. The illusion is delicate, built on the tension between what is revealed and what is concealed. When mystery tips into detachment, the observers begin to sense the hollowness beneath the mask. They notice the coldness, the distance, the absence of depth. Admiration wanes, obsession dulls, and the power that once enthralled dissolves into disinterest or pity. Control without substance cannot endure. Influence without authenticity cannot survive. Yet there is a lesson within this collapse. Mastery requires awareness, not merely performance. Silence is a tool, not an identity. Detachment is a strategy, not a shield. To sustain power, one must balance control with presence, restraint with engagement, mystery with substance. Influence is heightened when the silent figure allows glimpses of humanity to shine through, the brief smile, the subtle emotion, the imperceptible warmth that suggests depth without relinquishing authority. The observers are drawn not just to absence, but to the hints of life that lie behind the mask. They are captivated not by emptiness, but by the tension between control and hidden vitality. Inner emptiness is the danger of perfection. The silent, cold figure may command devotion, but they risk losing themselves in the very myth they create. Every act of control, every pause, every measured absence is a thread. Pull too hard on these threads without caution, and the tapestry unravels, leaving only isolation and hollowness. The key is deliberate calibration, to wield silence as a weapon, but never as a cage, to cultivate detachment, but never to sever the lifelines of emotion entirely. The mastery of influence demands psychological awareness as much as tactical skill. Notice the seductive irony. Those who achieve control through silence and detachment are often the most scrutinized internally. They measure others, yet they are measured by themselves. They withhold, yet they crave. They manipulate desire, yet they hunger for meaning. The inner struggle is invisible to observers, yet it is the force that determines whether power will endure or collapse. True mastery is not in domination alone. It is in sustaining presence, influence, and psychological authority without becoming the ghost of one's own design. Power without reflection is hollow. Authority without self-awareness is fragile. Silence without intention is chaos. To maintain the seductive gravity of cold control, one must continuously navigate the fine line between influence and emptiness. Observe the paradox. The more the world bows to your silence, the more you must anchor yourself within it. The more others project their fantasies upon you, the more you must remember the reality of your own interior life. The art of sustained power is psychological discipline, emotional insight, and the relentless pursuit of balance between mystery and substance. Those who succeed understand this duality instinctively. They know that cold control commands respect, yet warmth sustains obsession. They know that detachment fascinates, yet humanity endears. They know that absence elevates, yet presence grounds. Mastery is the dance between these forces, the calculated tension that enthralls others while preserving the self. To lose this balance is to fall from legend into emptiness, to exchange influence for isolation, to trade obsession for indifference. In the end, the practitioner of silent power realizes a dark truth. Absolute control over others may not require emotion, but absolute control over oneself demands it. Mystery seduces, absence hypnotizes, and restraint captivates. But the heart, the mind, and the spirit must remain anchored. Otherwise, the authority that commands empires of perception will crumble under the weight of inner emptiness. Cold control without internal balance is a hollow throne, an empty kingdom, a myth without substance. The most dangerous enemy of the silent figure is not the observer, the challenger, or the rival. It is the void that creeps within, unseen, insidious, inevitable. Control is power. Silence is influence. Stillness is authority. But the one who commands without self-awareness risks becoming a legend only in the minds of others, a hollow figure without life, a shadow of influence cast by the very emptiness they cultivated. True mastery is measured not just in the effect on others, but in the preservation of one's own soul amidst the seduction of omnipotence. Chapter 17. The cost of being unreachable. To become untouchable is to risk losing the very connections that make life meaningful. There is power in distance. There is influence in inaccessibility. The unreachable figure holds a gravitational authority over others, compelling desire through absence, commanding attention without effort, and bending perception with the simple act of non-response. People are drawn to what they cannot have, obsess over what they cannot touch, and worship what they cannot define. To be unreachable is to become a legend in the minds of others, a psychological emperor reigning over thought, imagination, and longing. Yet every fortress has a cost, and the walls of unreachability are no exception. Isolation is the hidden tax that accrues silently over time, unnoticed until it has anchored itself deeply within. When you cultivate inaccessibility as a weapon, you risk creating a prison for your own emotions. The same distance that enthralls others may sever the lifelines of intimacy, leaving your heart echoing in chambers empty of reciprocal understanding. Desire is a double-edged blade. It enthralls, but it also feeds on your absence, your silence, and the cold structure of control you maintain. The human mind is conditioned to crave connection, to seek resonance, to find validation through proximity. Denying these impulses generates power externally while generating tension internally. Emotional disconnection becomes both shield and burden. You gain admiration, fascination, and fear, but you also lose the softness of touch, the comfort of shared experience, the quiet understanding that only intimacy provides. The very tactics that create mystique simultaneously erect walls that the mind of the strategist cannot always penetrate. Being unreachable is a performance, a dance of careful timing, strategic absence, and emotional discipline. Every non-reply, every delayed response, every intentional silence communicates value, authority, and dominance. Observers interpret inaccessibility as proof of superiority, interpreting distance as refinement, control, or brilliance. They fill the void with fantasies, projecting desires and ideals onto a canvas of absence. You become an idea, a symbol, a psychological puppet, whose strings are pulled by longing itself, but the same performance that enthralls others begins to consume the performer. The more deliberately unreachable you are, the more you must monitor yourself to maintain the illusion. Vows. Every emotion must be measured, every impulse disciplined, every vulnerability concealed. Spontaneity erodes the mythology, emotional leakage threatens the illusion. In the pursuit of absolute control over perception, you sacrifice authentic expression, and in that sacrifice lies the subtle death of connection. Those who once saw you as a human being now see only a construct, a figure of desire and fear, but never of true closeness. Isolation carries weight beyond the absence of others. The mind, accustomed to controlling perception, begins to crave the very connection it suppresses. The unreachable strategist experiences moments of hollow victory. Admiration floods in, obsession intensifies, influence peaks, but the echo in the chambers of self-awareness reveals an emptiness no one else can fill. You are powerful, yes, but alone. You are desired, yes, but unrelatable. You are worshipped, yes, but misunderstood. The external empire grows while the internal world shrinks, and in that contraction lies the ultimate cost. Emotional disconnection is both armor and chain. It protects against intrusion, manipulation, and compromise, yet it also binds the self in rigid solitude. Relationships fade, Intimacy evaporates, and once simple human exchanges become dangerous territories to navigate. Every connection is a potential compromise, every expression a risk, and every revealing glance a threat to the fortress of control you have built. The unreachable mind learns to fear its own needs, to distrust the instincts that once guided connection, to perceive vulnerability as weakness rather than authenticity. The paradox of being unreachable is haunting. To gain mastery over others' desire, one must forfeit mastery over one's own emotional fulfillment. To be the object of obsession, one must surrender the ease of reciprocity. The more unattainable you become, the more the mind of the admirer projects value onto absence, while your own mind increasingly projects loneliness onto your constructed identity. Admiration becomes a mirror of emptiness, desire a reflection of detachment, and control a cage built of silence and distance. Yet there is a dark art in balancing unreachability with human presence. The unreachable are not merely cold voids. They are selective, strategic, and purposeful in their appearances. They reveal just enough to entice, just enough to sustain fascination, and just enough to maintain relevance. In this tension lies the seductive power of absence, a glimpse of life that hints at depth, a touch of humanity that stirs the imagination, a measured exposure that preserves the myth while anchoring the self. Those who master this equilibrium can manipulate desire without entirely sacrificing connection, guiding obsession while maintaining the integrity of their inner world. Still, mastery is fragile. One misstep, a reveal too early, a reaction too raw, a presence too frequent, can collapse the careful architecture of inaccessibility. The spell of desire falters, fascination wanes, and control slips into the mundane. The observers, once captivated by distance, now see imperfection. The unreachable becomes merely another figure, stripped of mystique, and the strategist is left with both the external perception of influence and the internal reality of solitude. This delicate dance, played on the edge of human psychology, demands constant awareness, patience, and self-discipline. To exist as the unreachable is to navigate a life of contradictions. You are both powerful and fragile, desired and detached, observed and isolated. Every act of control exacts a price, and the higher the status of mastery, the steeper the cost. You gain loyalty, attention, and fascination, but you pay with intimacy, spontaneity, and warmth. You manipulate longing, yet you endure longing yourself. You are worshipped, yet misunderstood. You are present in absence, but absent in presence. The final truth of being unreachable is simple and devastating. Control over perception is never free. Every layer of mystique comes with an equivalent cost to the self. Every ounce of fascination carries a shadow of loneliness. Every act of strategic withdrawal erodes a piece of connection that may never return. The power you hold over others' minds is mirrored by the distance you create from your own. And in the silence that surrounds your unreachable existence, the echoes of isolation grow louder, whispering the inevitable question: how much is influence worth when the soul itself begins to erode? The unreachable figure stands as both legend and warning. They are desired, feared, and admired, but they are also alone. The cost of inaccessibility is emotional debt, a subtle erosion of intimacy, a trade-off between control and genuine connection. To be unreachable is to wield power, yes, but to wield it without self-awareness is to flirt with emptiness. The unreachable commands the minds of others, but must also confront the shadow within, the silent, persistent reminder that the price of influence is the gradual, inescapable disconnection from one's own humanity. Control, fascination, and longing are intoxicating. Silence, absence, and unreachability are hypnotic. But every master of influence must reconcile with the cost of the unreachable, the isolation, the emotional disconnection, and the loneliness that thrives in the shadow of their own power. Desire can be commanded, attention can be owned, perception can be sculpted, but the heart remains ungovernable. And the unreachable learns, ultimately, that the truest mastery lies not in being untouchable, but in understanding the delicate balance between control and connection, between distance and intimacy, between the power to enthrall others and the responsibility to sustain oneself. Epilogue. The final realization: what you thought was control may have been your own surrender. Silence is not power. It is the mirror in which you see yourself reflected, and perhaps the reflection you least want to face. We are taught to equate quiet with dominance, absence with authority, and unreachability with influence. Yet in the final hours of reflection, in the cold emptiness of self-observation, the truth reveals itself. Silence is never power. It is exposure. The quiet room does not amplify your strength. It exposes the hollows within you, the unclaimed fears, the unspoken needs, and the invisible debts you carry to yourself. Those who are full do not speak. They do not need to. Their presence suffices. Their influence radiates naturally, and their gravity does not require justification. They operate from a completeness that is both invisible and irresistible, and the world bends around them quietly, without the fanfare of announcements or explanations. Their lives are unburdened by the compulsion to be understood or validated, and their silence is not empty, it is absolute. Those who are empty, however, must explain. They feel the itch to fill the void, to justify existence, to impose significance upon themselves. Words spill, gestures multiply, actions plead for notice, and in every motion the echo of incompleteness resonates. The empty speak to be seen. They move to be felt, they justify to be remembered, and in their attempts to create influence, they reveal the fragility of the very control they sought to wield. Explanation becomes a confession. Justification becomes vulnerability. Every word betrays what silence could have concealed. Power is not heard, it is felt. It permeates the spaces between words, the pauses in action, and the tension of controlled presence. It is the pause before a reaction, the stillness in a storm, the absence that beckons attention without demanding it. Power does not seek validation. It does not announce itself. It is the quiet gravity that draws the mind into orbit, the unspoken command that shapes perception, the invisible hand that guides thought without touching it. Those who mistake noise for authority will never understand this. Their clamor will echo only in empty rooms. We are all drawn to power as we perceive it, yet few understand its architecture. Influence is not built on domination, persuasion, or visibility. It is constructed from absence, restraint, and the careful orchestration of what is revealed versus what is withheld. Every pause is a statement, every non-answer a lesson, every withdrawal a form of subtle seduction. The observer becomes the observed, the silent becomes the ruler, and the mind that is trained to wait, to watch, to endure ambiguity becomes the holder of unspoken dominion. Yet mastery comes with a cost. The unspoken lessons of control are etched not only on others, but also on the practitioner. In shaping desire, one may have shaped obsession. In commanding attention, one may have harvested isolation. In cultivating unreachability, one may have sown the seeds of their own emptiness. The same silence that creates fascination also creates solitude. The same absence that draws admiration also evokes longing for connection that is never satisfied. Power without self-awareness becomes a cage. Influence without reflection becomes a burden. Authority without understanding becomes an echo in a void. The ultimate realization, the final truth hidden within the architecture of silence, is uncomfortable. It is a truth few will admit, and even fewer will face. The mechanics of influence are not a path to completeness. They are a mirror to incompleteness. The more one perfects the art of unreachability, the more one confronts the boundaries of self. The more one cultivates psychological gravity, the more one senses the hollowness that absence can create. Control over others' perception is seductive, intoxicating, and dangerous, but it is never liberation from the self. To walk this path is to embrace contradiction. You are both empowered and endangered, visible and invisible, desired and disconnected. Your mastery of others' attention is absolute, yet your understanding of your own emotions becomes ever more critical. Without reflection, the unreachable becomes lonely. Without compassion, the silent becomes hollow. Without awareness, the influential becomes a prisoner of their own architecture. Every act of influence is a test, every pause a measure, every absence a mirror reflecting not only the desire of others, but also the unspoken cravings within your own soul. Consider the lessons carefully. Silence may allow you to manipulate, to enthrall, to shape reality through the minds of others, but it also exposes the self to consequences invisible until they strike. Emotional disconnection, isolation, and the seduction of control are double-edged. They grant authority, yes, but they also erode intimacy, spontaneity, and human warmth. Every psychological strategy, every measured withdrawal, every unseen influence has a shadow, the subtle cost of self. The mind that commands others is also the mind that contends with its own craving for presence. 3. The heart that dictates desire is also the heart that risks solitude. And yet, there is power in this awareness. The final realization is not despair, it is mastery. To understand that silence is a mirror, that absence is a weapon that can wound oneself, that unreachability carries a price, this knowledge allows the practitioner to navigate influence consciously. It allows one to balance presence and absence, control and connection, influence and intimacy. It transforms psychological strategy from mere domination into a higher art. The art of self-aware authority, the cultivation of fascination tempered with care, the orchestration of influence without the betrayal of the soul. In the end, silence is not a shield, and absence is not invulnerability. They are tools, instruments in the hands of those who understand the mind and the human heart. They are mirrors reflecting the truth of desire, the mechanics of influence, and the fragility of self. Power is not spoken. Influence is not claimed. Authority is not seen. All of these are experienced, felt, internalized, not explained, not justified, not broadcast. Those who have learned this, who have walked the path of subtle control, who have endured the paradox of being unreachable, know the final haunting truth. The human mind is a landscape of projection, obsession, and longing. Silence and stillness are the brushstrokes, absence the canvas, and the strategist. The one who wields these dark tools is both the artist and the observer of the masterpiece. And finally, the greatest lesson reveals itself. The control of others is seductive, intoxicating, and real. But it is the control of oneself that defines true mastery. The unreachable can bend desire, manipulate perception, and command attention, but only the self-aware can endure the echoes of solitude without losing the essence of humanity. Silence is not power. It is a mirror. And in that mirror, you will see both the dominion you command over others and the dominion you must reclaim over your own being. Power is not heard, it is felt. And the final realization, the one lesson that outlasts all strategies, all withdrawals, all manipulations, is this. The strongest influence is the one that begins with mastery of the self, the quiet understanding of limits, and the fearless acceptance of the cost of being unreachable. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with others who might find it helpful. Your support means everything and helps this channel grow and reach more people. And if you'd like to go even further in supporting the channel, consider joining as a member to get exclusive content and behind-the-scenes insights. Stay curious, stay powerful, and I'll see you in the next one.